allow for us to not have a physical location. But the board is bound by all the other provisions of RSA 91A, and so we'll be following those guidelines as we normally would. That includes having minutes of these meetings, of this meeting, available to the public. We will be voting on motions as we normally would, except for each motion, we'll do a roll call. So each member will state their name and then how they vote. But otherwise, we'll be following all the other guidelines of RSA 91A. Maybe I'll just ask on the next agenda item if there's any additions or deletions from the agenda. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And hopefully if you can reach into the folder, there is a revised agenda. So we've added a discussion for graduation. Mr. Kelly's going to pop up. And we've added an action item, just a draft action item for FY21, and then just an action item talking about the board providing funds for the building project. So those are draft action items. So those are a couple of additions for a revised agenda.
Perfect. And I do have the revised agenda, and I pulled up the wrong one, so I apologize. I think this is the revised agenda, which reflects those comments and those items. Perfect. Thank you, Steve. Any correspondence this evening?
Yep, there's a letter from John Madden regarding support for the building project in the correspondence folder, as well as some educational professional development for board members from Primex in the correspondence folder. Thank you.
We have several sets of minutes to approve this evening, and those are all in the shared folder. And so I would ask if there is a motion to recommend the Hopkinton School Board approve the minutes of the regular school board meeting held on April 30th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Let's see. Norm?
Norm Kupel, yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato, yes.
Andrea?
Andrea Folsom, yes.
And Seth?
Seth A. Frame, yeah.
And Jim O'Brien is a yes. So those minutes are approved. So I would ask if there is a motion to recommend the Hopkinton School Board to approve the meeting minutes of the regular school board meeting held on May 5th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on those? Seeing none. Seth?
Seth A. Frame, yeah.
Norm?
Norm Kupel, yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato, yes.
Andrea?
Andrea Folsom, yes.
And Jim O'Brien is yes. Those minutes are approved. I would ask if there is a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the minutes of the regular school board meeting held on May 7th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, Seth got it. Well, we'll start in reverse order this time. Andrea?
Andrea Folsom, yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato, yes.
Norm? Norm?
Yeah. Norm Kupel, yes.
Seth?
Seth A. Frame, yeah.
And Jim O'Brien is a yes. It seems like we've been meeting a lot from all these minutes. Finally, is there a motion for this to approve the meeting minutes of the May 7th non-public session of the Hopkinton School Board?
So moved.
I think Andrea got that one. Who wants to second that? Rob?
Second.
All right, any discussion on those? Seeing none. Seth?
Seth A. Frame, yeah.
Norm?
Norm Kupel, yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato, yes.
Andrea?
Andrea Folsom, yes.
And Jim O'Brien is yes. All right, perfect. So we're gonna move on to public comment in one moment. I just wanted to give maybe, Steve talked a little bit about some of the additions on the agenda. I just, for the public and maybe for us to kind of get a little bearing on what we're gonna do this evening. We will hear some presentations and staff reports. And then under the items for board discussion, the two big items tonight are going to be finishing or moving forward with the conversation that we began on Tuesday around the budget. We have a presentation, and then the hope is that we can get to clarity on that so we can move forward with a number for a budget committee discussion next week. And we'll have a little bit of a conversation around planning for the annual meeting on Saturday or for the vote on Saturday. And then, as Steve said, we'll have a discussion on graduation planning, which I think will be a really interesting discussion for us. So with that, I am going to stop sharing for a moment and open public comment. And so if any members of the public wishes to provide public comment, if you're on Zoom, you can go to the bottom of your screen and there should be a raise hand button that you can click, and that will notify us that you wish to provide comments, and we can, I always say bring you over, and it sounds kind of weird, but we can allow you to speak by unmuting your microphone. So I'll open up public comment if anybody wishes to start. So I see Mary, raise your hand. So Mary, give me one moment. Good evening, Mary. Welcome. You should be able to unmute yourself. Thanks for joining.
I think you made me a panelist. I don't know if that was intentional or not, Jim, but I got promoted apparently. Oh, okay. So Mary, Christine, I just want to say thank you all very much for the effort that went into the voting that happened on Saturday. Very pleased that I was quite mistaken in saying that the outreach would not be successful. I'm sure everybody was very, very pleased with the turnout. So I just wanted to, I guess, go on record saying I apologize for my comments, and I'm very, very glad that I was mistaken in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Is anybody else from the public wish to provide public comment? There is another opportunity towards the end of the meeting before we take action item votes, and so this won't be your last bite at the apple. All right, so I'm gonna close public comments, or at least move on the agenda.
Jim, this one has public. Ann has.
Oh, there we go. I'm sorry, it just popped up on my screen. Thank you, Norm. Ann, give me 1 second. All right, thanks for joining us, Ann. You should be able to unmute yourself. Hello.
Hi. At the last school board meeting, I know there was some mention, and I wasn't sure how serious a consideration that was, to reevaluate the facilities bond and try to find cost savings by maybe deferring part of the facilities bond. And that had me a little bit concerned because it was passed overwhelmingly by the town. And I worry that it's a slippery slope if we start retroactively starting to make changes in decisions that were already approved, and rewriting things in a short-term effort to try to make a budget more palatable. And I don't even know if that's a serious consideration, but I wanted to put it out there that as someone who is a big proponent of the bond, which includes long overdue things that I wouldn't want to see put off further, I wanted to advocate for that. Thanks.
Really appreciate it. And can you provide just your last name so we make sure we have it for the minutes?
Yeah, sorry, Ann Shahade, Chehade.
Really appreciate it. All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, I see no other hands. So we're gonna move on in the agenda, and there will be additional time for public comments again at the end of the meeting. So I'm gonna pull back up the agenda. And so let's do comments from the Hopkinton School Board. And so I don't know, actually, does anybody want to start? I usually call on people, but I will call on people if no one raises their hand.
I'll start if you'd like,
Thanks,
Jim.
Rob. Why not? Thank you.
So I would just like to thank the folks from our meeting on Tuesday, for the public comment, particularly in the second public comment. It was very, very helpful, cogent, a lot of thoughts that helped me crystallize where I was and where we should go. So I appreciate that. And, you know, a lot of folks may, as Ann said, you know, the topic of reconsidering the building project is a fairly provocative thing to put up. But the reason I asked that question was because those were questions that were asked of me by folks who live in town. And I think it's important for the board to at least have those discussions. And that's why that came up. And I think it was very helpful in that we had the dialogue that we had and that the public comment that came after it. So I appreciate everybody's input on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Anybody can feel free to jump in.
Sure, I'll jump in. It's been nice driving around seeing all the senior signs on the lawn. It puts a smile on my face first thing in the morning. I want to thank the PTA for doing that. And I guess I want to ask Ella and Charlie how they like their signs. Are they enjoying them? I want them to chime in their little their signs. But it was really great seeing that, and I'm very fortunate to see how our community is coming together to show appreciation for the seniors, because hopefully once up tonight is done, we can start focusing our momentum to appreciation for them, because 2020 has been a rough year for everybody. And I couldn't imagine when I graduated way back then when I had hair that I wouldn't have a graduation. And I'm looking forward to celebrating with them and enjoying that occasion.
Thanks, Norm. Andrea or Seth? Andrea.
Yep, I am muted. Just to quickly echo, you know, it's only been 2 days since we saw you all, but I did want to echo Rob's comments of thanking people for not only reaching out in public comment at our last meeting, but over the past couple of days. It's really helpful to hear from everyone, and it has really helped me in better understanding the community, where people are coming from, and formulating my own thoughts around things. So I just really want to thank everyone. I think that we have an amazing community. Even if last Saturday felt disappointing for some folks, I think that moving forward, you know, we're really going to have an outcome that works for us all. It's my hope. So thanks.
Jim, so depending on how we look at this, I think based on the fluid ending of school might be the last official school board meeting, if you take the earlier date of the school session, so of this year. So I want to take a moment and just thank the teachers and staff. There's really no words I can say to thank them enough. This has been a extremely difficult period, not only pedagogically to redo everything you plan to do in the second semester on the fly and to execute that, but then to watch the school contract not pass and the budget not pass. I could understand if a member of our faculty or staff felt somewhat demoralized. I mean, that would be a rational and reasonable thing to feel. And I want you to first know that we understand that. And second, I want you to know that we will support you. We continue to support you. It is my #1 priority to support you. So I hope you finish this year as well as possible. I hope next year comes back in a regular way, and we will work to recognize you, support you, and keep the school system strong. And you are the backbone of that system. And so that can't be said enough. And it just seemed to me like the appropriate time to say it. So thank you.
Thanks, Seth. When you go last, it's hard not to be repetitive of all the things that people have said. So I just want to echo some of the things, including just the great outpouring of, I wouldn't even call it support. I think it's just interest is probably the right word. You know, these last couple meetings, maybe from the last couple weeks, I think just from the numbers that we've seen participate on these meetings, as well as, you know, those who have been watching them, the streams that we put on our website afterwards, the recordings, it's pretty incredible the amount of interest in the district and the amount of people weighing in and having conversations, which is which is great, and it's what this is all about. People bringing their opinions forward and paying attention and understanding the issues. And so I think the fact that we can utilize this technology is really making it so more people can participate, weigh in, and feel they know what's going on. So it's more of just an acknowledgement than it is anything else. And then I think to Seth's point, I want to just, this may be one of our last meetings with our 2 student representatives, and I just want to really thank Ella and Charles for the amount of time, effort, thought, and comments that they've brought to these meetings over the past year. Their participation has been great, and you probably do have the record for the most meetings attended by a student rep, and that will probably hold for quite a long time. But Ella and Charles, thank you so much for bringing the student voice to our meetings and for being such great student reps for your class. So thank you very much. And actually, I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to start with Ella because she's smiling. And if there's any comment you'd like to make, Ella.
Well, kind of answer Norm's question slash, just saying, yes, I did love my sign. I know a lot of seniors really liked it because they were able to see Mr. Kelly and Madame and some other teachers come and put signs out. So they were able to see some teachers for hopefully not the last time, but if it is the last time. And I know a lot of seniors really enjoyed it. And it's so great that everyone is being so supportive for the senior class.
Congratulations. Charlie.
Well, yeah, I kind of just have to echo what Ella said to that extent. The signs were a really great idea, and I think a lot of seniors really, really appreciated it. My other comment was really just kind of a thank you to everyone, because I know this, like Jim said, it could be one of our last meetings with you guys, and I feel like I've learned a lot, and I want to just thank you guys for this opportunity.
Thank you. We've enjoyed having both you and Ella, and again, congratulations on graduating, and can't wait to hear of all the wonderful things that you guys do in the future. So stay in touch. And don't be shy tonight. If you have something to add, especially as we get to the graduation, we'd love to hear your thoughts on everything, and especially the graduation, I should have said. So thank you. So we are going to move on to presentations and staff reports and the administrator reports. And so, Steve, do you want to start with Matt? And I saw that he raised his hand, so I think that might mean he wants to be beamed up.
If you want to bring him forward, that'd be great.
Oh, yeah, that's my job. I can do that.
You're the host at the moment.
All right, so let me do that. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
All right. We can hear you, so we're all set. So thanks for joining us. Okay. We're excited to hear your report.
Good. I'll keep it brief, though. I wanted to actually start by echoing some of Mr. Ephraim's comments. Obviously, switching to an all online learning has been an interesting challenge for all of us. I think what has made this possible has been the work ahead of time and the support of all of our staff members, both teachers, instructional assistants, our library media folks, who have just put in an incredible amount of work to make the online teaching successful. Certainly many of those who were already using a lot of the tools that we did end up using, Google Classroom and Screencastify, Seesaw, Flipgrid, and so many others, that worked tirelessly to make sure that their colleagues were able to use those effectively as well. I mean, the week that we had and then ongoing as we struggle to make this better every week has just been wonderful to see. And I certainly can't thank the library media folks enough. They have just been absolutely wonderful in supporting staff members. I wanted to thank them in particular. And then obviously my staff has been great. We've all been transitioning to remote assistance, which is a very different style, but it's been an interesting thing. And then trying to support all the schools as we move towards the traditional end of year type activities. So coming up with modified report cards, and things like that to support our altered existence that we're living in this day and age. But it's been a wonderful, or I wouldn't say wonderful, it's been a very interesting time, and certainly thank all those who have made it as successful as it has been. So, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions from the board? Matt, the only question I have is, I'm just curious with all the, with all the, I guess the computers that for students, I'm just curious how that's all going. Has that been a challenge for you to troubleshoot? And then that's probably what's on my mind.
Sure. Yeah, it certainly was a little bit of a challenge. We've ended up distributing so far about 215 or so devices to students. And the failure rate has been quite low. I think we've only had, maybe 7 or 8 come back for various things. And fortunately, we've mainly just been able to swap them and troubleshoot them afterwards. And again, our bus driver, Jesse Morrill, has been fantastic in doing 3 times a week deliveries for us in a safe way, which is fantastic. And then, yeah, it's been pretty solid. And actually, one of the interesting things, we had a meeting of statewide tech directors on Friday, and then talking with many of my colleagues who have also gone through this, we're actually noticing that failure rates on our devices are the same or possibly even a little bit lower than they would be during normal school. The lack of travel and, maybe a little more care from some students since it's their lifeline to school as opposed to, one of a couple dozen in the cart that they might be taken care of. So that's actually been really good and it's been a burden, but a manageable one. So
that's good to hear. All right. Any other thoughts for Matt?
Just
Rob.
Matt, are they coming back for the summer? Or are they going to stay out there? What's the plan?
Right now, we are planning on picking them up shortly after the end of school, just working with the principals now on finalizing pickup in that sort of last week time frame. For those students who we know will be taking part in summer school and have devices, we'll just leave them with them and pick those up when we're ready to return to normal school, whenever that is. But that is the plan, and obviously we have some plans to make sure that all our staff are safe doing that, and very similar to the sort of pickup that we did right when this all started for pickup materials.
Great, thank you.
Andrew.
I just wanted to publicly thank you, Matt, real quick, for being so fast on updating everything on the school website when we were getting all the information out for drive-through voting and our virtual meetings last week. It was really so helpful. We could send stuff to you and you'd have it updated in minutes. So I just wanted to let you know how much we really appreciated that.
No problem. Thank you.
Norm, I saw your hand go up, but it went back down. Just wanted to, nope, you're all set. Perfect. All right. Well, Matt, thank you very much. Really appreciate all your work that you're doing, especially keeping everybody and all the students connected. Have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is our business administrator, Michelle Clark.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna start off like Matt. I can tell you that from what I know of what our staff has done in this setting, again, with really no experience at all in doing that, and what I learned from my nephews who are in Massachusetts, it's like they're in a back in the 19th century or something. So I can't thank you enough for taking that on top of, in essence, your regular job. So it's kind of like doing 2 jobs in essence. As well as, Matt talked about Jessie. It's a little different delivering meals, but she's been great, and food service. Doing the best they can with trying to make sure that those who need the meals, and again, trying to, learn things on the fly as far as how to get things out to people to make sure that they can order it. So I just want to start off with that as well. The business office has been busy in itself with the normal things this time of year. We're getting close to the year end. So we're really trying to work with staff as far as some open POs that they have, take a look at where we are with just 2 more payrolls left after this payroll. And then we have open enrollment this month. So that is a lot. And I gotta, again, bring kudos to the staff. Usually Lori and I go out to every single building. We love doing it. We are there in the library for a couple hours to help staff do open enrollment. But a lot of them have took it upon themselves to do it themselves. They always had an option to resort to us, and we could do it for them if they gave us authority, and we just give them confirmation of what they had asked us to do. But I'd say greater than 50% probably have really taken on that challenge as well. Then, you know, the building project in itself and bond meetings related to that, that has been some additional things that have happened. Then I'll go right into food service. You know, we've been trying to work with the food service director about making sure we're gonna have staff to deliver and make meals through June 30, because that's our plan, is to do through June 30th. We're gonna go down to Monday and Wednesday deliveries. But give all the meals that they would need to make up the Thursday, Friday. But they've been great. Staff has been great about that. The facility, the facility department, I'll just call it, you know, working really hard to get the custodians back in the buildings, to feel safe and be, you know, in a productive environment. So looking forward to that happening next week. As well as, you know, we're trying to, the director and I are trying to finalize the lead project, really get the last bits of that done so that we can then ask for the state for the money that we have spent on the items that do qualify, because some of them don't qualify based on the amount of lead MP, I think it's MPs, that we get, as well as we're also, Maple Street Schools, the last security project. That we're trying to finalize things, and we're trying to relocate where the Maple Street School office intercom system is, to not be on the wall, but to be actually on the desk. So it would make more sense than someone having to get up and go to that. So that's the last piece. So in hopefully the near future, it will be coming to the board for sign off on that, and we can get the money back, and that would be the last building. So I think that's about it, but I'd be, other than being here with you guys, that's another thing that I've been doing, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome, thanks, Michelle. Any questions? Norm.
Michelle, I hope you're feeling well. I just wanted to say, you know, over the last month or so, you've crammed so many numbers. You've answered every question this board has asked from you. You've been at multiple issues with our facility project. I just wanted to say thank you. You've been there every second that we've needed something, and really helping us get through a really tough time for this district. Your support, Steve, has just been really, really noted. And I just wanted to really let this community know that you're a numbers cruncher. You are transparent with what we need to know and what we see. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Other questions? Thank you so much, Michelle.
You're welcome.
All right, and next up is a report from our superintendent, Steve.
Sure, I'll just review a few things. The move to distance learning was really hard for me in that I can't walk into a classroom readily and see what's going on. So it's been kind of this what's going on experience. But recently the teachers, some teachers have shared with me some of their work that they've done in the distance learning environment. And I get to see examples of our wood technology, or kids building mountain bike elements at home and doing things around the house, which was extraordinary. And I saw a second grade lesson, and they were using all things to do fractions that they found at home in the kitchen, which was just really cool. And a music Padlet where kids created songs, and it was just so enlightening for me, and I admire so much the innovation and entrepreneurship and spirit that all our faculty and staff and has approached it. But it was so eye-opening to me to see what the potential is. And I think this will be added to our repertoire of instruction as we get back to regular school. We are planning the last couple of days for our staff, and we've put in time to reflect and record what's done really well and what can we do better in gaps in our curriculum and our student profile. So we really wrap our hands around this experience going into next year. One thing that has been really evident for me is the amount of collaboration that this journey has taken with teachers, with support staff, with teachers, with our unions, with each other, with the leadership team. And we've done a significant change in curriculum that was collaborative. We've changed our instruction, of course, collaborative assessment. We've done, Michelle and I have put together an amazing amount of personnel procedures and new practices to accommodate for the change in environment. We've moved to social work support where Matt's, we've got Wi-Fi for families and food service. And so it's just an incredible piece at how much together and collaboration was necessary and how I'm appreciative of the spirit of collaboration that exists in the district. I do miss walking down the hall and just being able to see a teacher. It was today, believe it or not, I had 47 phone calls. I made 47 phone calls today. And a lot of those would have been walking down the halls and grabbing people and trying to connect. One thing about the distance learning is most people are next to their phones. So the 47 phone calls were pretty efficient today. And the last piece is, as part of my end of year, besides planning the end of year activities and the awards, which is a lot of fun, I also review everyone's professional development and their credentialing. And so every 3 years, our support staff get Para 2 certified and our teachers get credentialed or certified. And one of the things that we have put in place in the district for everyone when they want a new credential is to reflect on the professional learning impact on their practice. And I absolutely get so invigorated reading how change and how they're incorporating what they've learned and how they want to continue to learn through their review of their professional development, and how devoted support staff are and teachers are to their craft. And that reflection, and we're going to add a piece of reflection about distance learning because that reflection piece is so key to continued learning. So it's been very busy, but it's been good work, good collaborative work with extraordinary people, extraordinary support staff, teachers, administrators, and of course the board as well. So it's been hard work, it's good work, but I just appreciate everybody's willingness to work together.
Thanks, Steve. And of all those phone calls, I apologize because several of them were probably from me. And
it's okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Any questions for Steve? Getting off easy tonight, Steve.
Okay.
I just want to
We've been hanging out a lot together, so no problem.
but definitely a thank you for all the work and hours and time you've been putting in. The past 2-3 months. It's a lot. So thank you.
You bet. No problem. Thank you.
So we're going to move forward on the agenda under items for board discussion and start with a look at the budget and where we left off previously. So if everybody bears with me just for a moment, I'm going to stop sharing the agenda and I'm going to start sharing presentation. And for board members, as I go through the presentation, it's going to be hard for me to see your smiling faces as well as any hands that you might raise. So I would just ask if you want to, if you have clarification, a question, or you want to jump in at any time, just unmute yourself and interrupt. I will definitely not take any offense, but I don't want you to lose the opportunity because I can't see you as I go through the presentation. So please don't be shy. But I think what we wanted to do, from where we ended our discussion on Tuesday to today, I think we've answered a bunch of questions and we've made some progress. I think some really good progress. And so what I'm going to hopefully do, I'm going to do it, and I hope I do a good job, is to kind of take a step back and sort of revisit sort of where we've been over the past week or so. So we're all clear as a board, and then I think for the community to be clear sort of where things are. And then we'll walk through, again, some of the potential reductions that Steve had provided to us on Tuesday. Walk through those, and then, we did, and brought up again here today, we did spend a bunch of time talking about the facility bond project. And so we're going to want to talk about that. And then we have, I'm going to put forward a bit of a proposal that the board's been talking about a little bit here. And then that will be open for discussion. And then we'll sort of see where we end up. The goal, I think, of tonight for us is to get consensus around a number, an amendment number that we will bring forward to the budget committee for a meeting next week. And that at that meeting, we'll present to the budget committee, get their input, and then have a final vote on a number that we'll give to the moderator. And then the moderator will put that on the ballot. So that's the journey. Hopefully we'll go through this evening. This presentation's not incredibly long. It shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes or so to go through. So what I
Jim,
wanted
can I
to
ask a quick question,
okay,
Jim?
Please do, Norm. Yeah.
The reduction that we agreed to tonight is what we're agreeing to the ballot, correct? Because
Correct.
Okay, so that number doesn't change. That's going on the ballot.
So I think
if we lock it in tonight, right? That's what the agreement is.
So we can talk about what the motion would say. I mean, we can bring a motion to the budget committee if we want their input. We can have a final vote on Wednesday on the final number. If that feels like if we want the budget committee's input on a number, that might be our best bet. My hope is that they will agree with whatever we come up with tonight. But if we want to take their input seriously, they may provide some that we may want to adjust ourselves. So leaving the room for a final vote on Wednesday may be wise. Again, if we want their input. Okay. So this first slide is really just for a little bit of back for where we started and where we are today. And so the first column are the articles on the warrant that just on Saturday the town voted on. And so the first column would be the impact of the budget that the school board and the budget committee brought to that meeting for the vote. Excuse me. Coming out of that vote, the second column shows what the impact of that vote was. And so you can see for Article 4, Article 8, those two articles failed. And so coming out of the meeting, we know that reduced the tax impact. Articles 6, 9, 10, and 11 all passed. And so those won't be voted again. They're not up for reconsideration. And so just taking what's the impact of the vote of the meeting, you could see that the tax impact from the proposed budget and the proposed warrant, I should say, this is from the proposed warrant of $1.61 was decreased to $1.02. We have talked about as a board, and we presented before the vote that we had the $240,000 of savings from distance learning that we could apply to the operating budget in order to bring down the tax rate. And so if we look at how that would apply on Article 3, that would reduce the tax rate on Article 3, which is the budget, from 75 cents to 44 cents. And so again, on that column, you could look down and you could see what the total tax impact of the warrant would be if you applied those savings. And so the last column is the effect of the proposed reductions of tonight's meeting, and there's a bunch of question marks there because we haven't addressed those items. But we do know from our meeting on Tuesday that in order to get to a zero tax rate impact on our operating budget, which we talked about as being a goal or a potential goal that we were going to try to reach towards, if that was going to happen, we needed to reduce the operating budget, or find ways to reduce that operating budget by $337,500. If we accomplish that, then we could get to a zero tax rate impact on the operating budget. And and we talked about this on Tuesday, but I just want to reiterate it again, that that even with that tax rate impact, if we got to 0 on the operating budget, the other articles, Article 6, 9, 10, and 11 have passed. And so the impact of those articles is 27 cents on the tax rate. So this is just to revisit sort of the conversation on that, on the fund balance and the $240,000 savings from distance learning, just to reorient ourselves. So we had budgeted, or in the budget that was presented and approved by the budget committee, there was a use of $150,000 of fund balance. We learned that we have a savings of $240,000 from distance learning. And then over the fiscal year, as we close in at the end of the fiscal year through budget management, we have accrued savings of $260,000, which brings to a grand total of about $650,000 of undesignated fund balance that we are anticipating to have at the end of this fiscal year. And as we spoke about, there's multiple ways to use that fund balance. The three places that we have talked about using that is, the first one is to maximize the amount of Article 10 tax stabilization money that we can use. And so if we invest $220,000 from that surplus, or from the fund balance, into Article 10 tax stabilization, that would maximize the amount that we can put in there and give us money that give us available funding that we can use in future years for tax rate stabilization. We talked about using $390,000 of the fund balance for the FY21 budget, so the one that we're working on, to reduce the tax rate. That would go into that budget as revenue, but that would the end result would be a reduction in the tax rate. And then finally, from the 650, we would have $40,000 unobligated. And then just a reminder, the 390 for the reduction of the tax rate, that would be the 150 that we have already obligated, or have already put into the budget for fund balance, combined with the distance learning savings. Those two equal the 390.
Can I ask a question here, Jim?
Yes, please do.
So since the contingency fund of 150,000 failed, what would happen next year if we had unexpected costs? So we're using these, I mean, as I see this, we're using our surpluses in various ways, and we anticipated having 150,000 of a contingency fund that we won't have. So how do we plan for that?
So if there's unanticipated, and I love Steve to jump in and answer this one too. So if we have an unanticipated cost, those costs would have to be funded. We wouldn't have a contingency, so they would have to come out of the budget, or as we look at, you know, what our fund balance may be as we go through the year, that it would have to come out of the operating budget as we pass. Steve, I don't know if you want to add in anything onto that.
Right. No, that's it. You're either going to spend some money that we thought we had for fund balance, or not fund a different program later on in the year and constrict the funds that way. But right, we are now limited to whatever we get approved on that article. There is no just in case fund in case we have something we don't know about.
Okay.
Great. So this is the list, and it's the list that Steve had provided us on Tuesday for reductions to the operating budget for us to consider. We spent a bunch of time discussing this list on Tuesday, so I'm not going to go through every item. I think the only item that was added, and again, I'll look to Steve, I believe is under equipment. There was, I think Rob had asked if Steve and Michelle would look through the supplies, and so I think there's a new line under supplies, the supplies general of $15,000 that I believe is a new item. So Steve, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so Michelle and I, as requested, reviewed spending over time in areas where we felt, and we believe that we could, as Rob, like, trim the sails and cut and shave some, but we're also looking at this as the level, not just for this year and going forward too, because we don't want to you know, create a bigger boulder going forward in the budget. But we think, based on where we have been and where we are, we can reduce supplies in general across our function codes by $15,000 and be okay.
Perfect. So thanks, Steve. So we can see at the bottom here, the total of all of these reductions for consideration total $374,598. And so remember from a previous slide in our previous conversation, to get to zero tax rate impact, we were looking, we needed about $337,500 to get there. So if we were to implement all these reductions, we could get to where we had talked about trying to get to. But I would also state, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, that I'm not sure everybody agreed with all these reductions, and so that's part of our conversation here today. So this gets us to the conversation on the facility bond. And so I think, you know, this is sort of my interpretation of where that conversation was and sort of conversations that board members have had with myself over the past couple of days. And these are sort of principles that I think we share. And so I do want to state them because I do think the community is really interested in this. And so the first principle really is that the school board supports moving forward with that facility project in its entirety and on the same time frame as was put forth and agreed upon last year by the voters. Second, that our facilities and programs are really both essential components to ensuring that we have a high quality education here in Hopkinton. Both those, both the facilities and investing in our facilities and investing in our programs, those both require adequate funding and they should not be in competition with each other. And I think over the years, they have been in competition with each other. And so I think as we've moved through the last couple of years, and especially as we've been talking about the facility project in its many iterations, that, you know, both those components, our programs and our facilities, need the funding necessary in order to ensure that that our students are receiving the education they deserve. And then finally, I think, you know, the providing the financing for this project is the board's responsibility. And I know that the board is committed to finding the right financing approach that meets the needs of the project, that fully funds the project, as sort of bullet number 1 says, as well as considering the tax impact or the impact on the tax rate. And so as we've moved over the past couple days, we've talked about, and I've thought a lot about, sort of what a phased financing approach to the facility project might look like. Again, using those principles in mind, that we want to keep the scope of the project, and we're committed to keeping the timeline of the project as the building committee has been hard at work moving forward on. And so some objectives as we've been looking at this, one is there a way to spread out the cost of borrowing, the $9.76 million, to not hit the budget all in one year? And if we're going to, and if we're able to get to a zero tax impact on the FY21 budget, and then we have the bond hit all at once in 1 year, which we'll see in a moment, you know, that could be a jump, especially, well, it would be a jump, especially from a zero budget to fully funding the bond. And so is there a way to spread that out over more than 1 year in order to more gradually bring in that tax impact? The second objective is is really an offshoot of that first one. By doing so, you know, can we provide some financial relief and tax relief in the next 2 years as we look at the next 2-year budgets, knowing that the district faces uncertainties in how we're going to be operating, and then in some of our regular revenue sources from the state. You know, the third one is around providing full project funding, providing the full $9.76 million needed for the project to be financed, and then to stay on schedule and not delay any deliverables of the project. So this is the current plan, and this is this is what the plan would be for a full bond that we've been working on. And so the plan that we've been working on in terms of financing is to bond the full amount all at once, and so go to the bond bank in July of 2020 to bond the full $9.76 million. Michelle has been working with the bond bank on bond runs. We did an estimate bond run back in the fall as we were originally developing the FY21 budget, and I believe the bond run for planning from the bond bank, I think it was around 3.5%. And that was what we built our budgets around. And now the bond bank, as we get closer to the actual bond sale, for a 15-year bond, has said, the plan on 1.76% for that bond. And I do think they're conservative in how they do the bonding, but just want to put that out there so that it could be even lower. So if you look at the next couple of years, you can just see how the payment on that debt looks. And so in July of 2022, or in fiscal year 2022, so July of next year, the bond payment would be $823,000 with a tax rate impact of $1.06 if we do it all at once. And so as we think about what a phased approach or what an approach could look like, really what that means is that we wouldn't bond all the amounts at once, that you could do the bond in 2 separate bond sales. And so that we're bringing dollars to the project to keep moving everything forward, and then a second bond to ensure that the project has its full amount. And so Michelle, by some magic, was able to get from the bond bank what a second bond would look like if we decided to, if the choice was to split this bond in half, so do $5 million in July, $5 million a year from now in July. So that's what this chart shows, is sort of what this type of phased approach would look like. And what you see for the impacts is if the first bond would be a 15-year bond at that 1.76%. And you could see that the payment and the tax impact would be half. That stands to reason if you're bonding half the amount. And then if you did a bond 2, the proposal would be that you would do that next year. And so this time next year we'd be going for a second bond. And so Michelle got from the bond bank planning, what I call a planning interest rate. No one has a crystal ball, and so looking ahead a year for what the bond would be is challenging, and the bond bank doesn't want to promise us something they can't deliver. And so just like they did a year ago, or in the fall when we looked for the first number, they provided us with a planning interest rate at 3.5%. The number we're looking at now is 1.76%. So those numbers fluctuate. I think the bond bank is a pretty conservative institution, and so they're giving us what the worst case scenario might look like. And so for planning for this presentation and what we're working on, we looked at a 2.75% interest rate for 15 years for a second bond to finish out the full amount. And so as we look at the savings, really where the savings accrue, and I'll show it on the next slide, is we're not borrowing the entire amount and paying interest on the entire amount when we're not going to be using all $9.76 million at the same time. And so by borrowing and financing and managing the funds as we move forward, you save money on that, the $10 million in the interest that you might spend. And then I'll just note that as we move forward, I do think that having the finances available to ensure that there's no slowdown of the project and that we can pay our vendors and that we're not changing the scope and timeline, requires us to manage the cash available for the bond. And we do know that there are, if we're running into cash availability with this type of proposal, that the bond bank does have bridge loans and have pretty much bond anticipation loans available. They explained this to us and to the building committee when we met with them early on. And so they can provide additional borrowing that would then just get rolled into that next bond sale for the district. And so what this looks like with the current plan and then what a phased approach plan may look like. So you can see at the top, the current plan at the 9.76 million for 15 years at the 1.76%, and what that looks like in terms of the next couple of years and the tax rate impact of that. And then this chart just really shows, I just took those two proposed phase bond runs and added those together. And so you can see that for next year, as we work on this budget, if we were to move forward with the $5 million bond, that the savings in the budget that we're currently working on is $122,316. And then for the moving forward, we started to apply the next few year payments with the 2.76% interest rate, so the higher interest rate to be safe on the planning side. But you can see in fiscal year 22 that we have a $280,000 savings, which then in 23 and 24 starts to tighten up as we get sort of the full $10 million of bond for the project. And so this is an option for a financing plan for the project that enables us over the next 2 fiscal years, as we have more uncertainty in the economy and state funding, how we could more gradually increase the tax rate over the next several years, rather than having the tax rate increase all at once next year, when, again, we want to do the building project, but we do face some economic uncertainties. And so what does that mean for next year, and so for the budget we're working on? And so I had many conversations with Steve over the past couple of days, part of the 45 that he just had today, just to talk about, if there was that savings from the bond, if we had next year in this budget, the $122,000 of headroom from the phased approach to the bonding. On this list that he put forward for consideration, what are those most important ones, or the ones that he would feel best about if we were able, he and his team, if we were able to move those off? And so the 3 here that are highlighted, I think are the ones that Steve recommended. I don't think Steve wants to see any of these really. They all have an impact, but I think these were sort of the top tier ones that we might want to think about removing and applying some of that savings for. So there's a section of English, the STAR software, and then the special education teacher that we talked about on Tuesday. Again, you can see the total of all the cuts, and then what 337,000 needed to get to the 0 tax rate. And so if you take those items that I just highlighted, I just put it onto here so we can look at them. The total of those 3 items is about $122,195. Actually, it is $122,195.49 would be the cost of those items. And then the bottom chart just shows if we did the $5 million bond with the sort of the 2-phased financing approach, the savings there would be about $122,265. There should be a comma and not a decimal point there. But we could pay to bring those items back from the cut list with the savings from the bond. And so this chart again is what I just put the list of Steve's recommendations minus removing those 2 items from the cut list, and then adding in the savings from the 2-phased financing. And so you can see that the total here would be $374,668 and 42 cents, still above the $337,500 needed to get to that tax rate impact on the operating budget. And so this is the final slide. Thank you for bearing with me. I know this is a lot of numbers to try to keep track of. But if you look at that last column, if we wanted to move forward with this proposal or make adjustments to it, which is fine, you could see the effect of these proposed reductions on the tax rate. So with that amount that I just had in this previous slide, which was the $374,668, we would actually see a 5-cent reduction in the Article 3 proposed Article 3 budget item. And so then through the warrant, you would see that the warrant would be a total of 22 cents on the warrant. And so that is my last slide. And I apologize for all the numbers, and I apologize for talking so much, but I hope this was at least helpful to start the conversation from the board over how we wish to proceed. So maybe I'll open it up for questions or comments from board members.
I would just be curious to hear what Steve has to say in terms of how this would roll out in Michelle. And
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Yeah, no, I think it's a way to bring back a special education teacher. I think it removes. I think the phasing is a wonderful option. Michelle and I talked about it today. You know, and I talked to Gordon Bristol, our owner's project manager today, Jay Burgess today. So we did quite a lot of communication around it and felt that this is a really good solution that phases in the full impact of the project over very difficult fiscal years or fiscal challenges. And Michelle and I spoke about this today with Gordon. If there is some, as Jim alluded to, we might have to do a bond anticipation note next spring. Michelle monitors the cash really well. She'll give us a heads up. And I still think that exercise and this is of that much value that exercise is worthwhile. I think this is a wonderful solution to reinstating necessary program and soften the impact of a significant facility project without delaying or without phasing and not having a burn rate on the project itself. So I had a lot of good talks with Jim today.
amazing work, gentlemen.
Steve or Michelle? Oh, I'm sorry, Norm, go ahead.
No, you ask your question first.
Well, my question is maybe just either Steve or Michelle, if you could just explain briefly what a bond anticipation note is, because I don't know if I did it justice or a very good job. And I'm just before, because I'm sure that's a question people have. I'm just curious if you could explain that quickly.
Sure, I'll start and then Michelle can fill in. So Gordon has put together a cash flow withdraw, a payment schedule. Michelle has already started paying, some of our vendors. And so, for example, and she did this with me, like there's expected $300,000 in July, $600,000 in August, and she went right through, and based on her calculations, the $5 million draw would be close to being completely replete or empty in about February. So when she projects that, then she would go to the bond bank and say, look, we're going to need, and based on the withdrawal, $1 million to hold us over in anticipation of our next bond. And because the bond has already been approved, it's been authorized by the community, there is no risk because we have authorization already. Then our bond counsel has to review and just review the numbers, and we go into the second bond. So that's the bridge between when the first bond is withdrawn to completion and bridging it until we get the second payment, and then we withdraw on that. I still think the savings that you listed will overwhelmingly be in support of any fees based with either and as you asked, there's only about a $2,000 to $3,000 fee to go to the bond bank for the second bond, because their fee is based on the total amount borrowed, and that's not going to change. And our bond counsel has already done the expansive review, so it would just be an updating. So it's not a full closing, it's just a sliver of a closing. So I think the fees and the safeguards and the amount of savings that you projected, I think it really does work.
The only thing I would add, you guys both did great on explaining it, is that we'll also look at kind of like what Steve talked about, is that we've paid some already. We'll do the same thing next year. So we're not, if we have a little bit of, depending on what our fund balance is, it's not like we have excess cash, but in essence, when you have fund balance, that means you have excess asset, and some of that being cash. And so we certainly wouldn't bond all of, unless exactly what we need. We would look at reserves, take that into consideration. That would be the only thing I would just add.
Thanks, Michelle. Norm, sorry I cut you off earlier.
No, you're fine. So we talked about this last time, and just want to make a couple comments. I wrestled with this, but I think the presentation is really, really good, and I think it's a good adjustment to what we're looking at right now for the district. One thing that kept running through my mind that was important to me is trust in this board. And for me, it's important that as a board, we always fulfill the goal that's been approved from this community. And that was the most important thing to me, is that we continue to get this project on track, on time, not losing any money on this specific project, that the people who voted for this will see it through. And to me, that was very important, because this board needs to always have the trust of the people. And for us to be able to look at that and say, all right, we understand where the tax impact is coming. It's important. You know, like I said, I had to wrestle with this for a little bit, you know, but what was important to me is that this board is going to be the one initiating both bond runs. And to me, that's important, because we don't know who's coming and going in the future. And it is important that if we are making a change that's deviating from this, that we are in it together, that we agree that we are taking this bond at this time and then at this time. Because I don't want to go backwards. I don't want us to look at a year saying we are hesitant because of the interest or something like that, and we decide to not fulfill the scope of the project, because then we would lose the opportunity to fulfill the voters' need. The other thing I just want to caution the board with respect is, I understand we had to come to a consensus on this for the operating budget, and we had to make an adjustment. But I do want to caution the board that moving forward, we should be careful and really lean on the facility committee. It was a charge from the previous board that asked them for oversight on this, and we're supposed to vote on their recommendation. I understand that we are going through a tough time where we need to make this quickly. I support the idea of saving a position. The numbers work out, so we're able to do that, especially with special education. And for me, that holds a lot of value. I guess my question for this proposal is, what is the interest over the term of the bond after? Is it greater than what was proposed before? For example, we start, I believe, let me look at my notes here. It was after 24, Jim. What happens after fiscal year 24, as we would be paying on the bond until 35? Do we end up paying more under the interest rate scenario that's been presented?
Yeah, thanks, Norm. So I'll ask Michelle to answer that. And just remember, we haven't, we haven't come to a decision on length of term that we were looking for bonds. So these runs that I put forward are 15 years, because that seemed, that's what we had generally talked about that. But this board hasn't decided on what we're going to look for a bond yet. So, but I don't know, Michelle, you probably are best equipped to answer this Norm's good question.
So what I did do is just quickly, the ironic thing is I was doing this and Jim was doing this other thing, which was some pieces of it were similar. But again, I can't stress it enough what Jim just said about the interest rate. And again, looking at last year, what we got, and this year, because that will make a difference. And I don't think it would swing that much the other way. But choosing the 15-year option, it would be about a $355,000 more over the 15 years. But again, that's at not a double interest rate, but in essence, I believe it would be a lot less than that, because I don't believe we would get a 2.75% interest rate.
So can I just that? So Michelle, that means that by doing it in the phased-in approach, what we're buying is some breathing room right now, but we're paying. It's going to cost us more because the interest rate, at least by the projection, will be higher on that second bond that we buy, and so there is a cost to this, and it's a cost to buy some immediate tax relief for payment down the road. Is that right?
That's right. But what we don't also know is when we're investing the money, We're not going to have probably great interest right now, but could there be potentially more, a year from now, which would mean, interest rate could rise, and then therefore the interest rate on your deposits could rise too in the same way, you know what I mean? So then it could be a smaller gap.
But I am supportive of this proposal, but the cheapest way to proceed in actual dollars, if you're not interested in, immediate sort of tax relief, is to buy the bond now. Is that right?
But the phased-in proposal is still cheaper than what has been presented, with the 3.75% bond run and the amount of interest in the past too. So we're still beating, it's saving more than what we had a year ago when we presented the project. It's just happens to be that the interest rate right now locked in at a 15 is this and projected next year. So right. If it's the similar type overestimation by the bond bank, that difference will squeeze down.
Correct.
But I just want to make clear that I think this is a good idea, but there is a cost
sure
associated with it, that we could have a cheaper option, but it's going to mean more taxes now as opposed to later.
Right. The risk is it's rate risk. That's your risk. Right. The fees are nominal, but there is a little rate risk. And what the bond bank gave was the outer extremity of the rate risk.
Okay. Thank you.
Andrea.
I guess I've been thinking about this, God, all week. Like the first thing I talk about when I wake up. But when it comes to kind of how much more we would be spending, I think of it like this. If I go to buy a house, it would be cheaper for me to buy a house with a mortgage of 10 years, but I don't have that money. I don't have the money that I would need to put down to purchase my house over the course of 10 years. So I get a 30-year mortgage. Ultimately, yes, I do pay a little bit more, but I also end up with a house, which I would not be able to get if I tried to do a 10-year mortgage. So that's how I've been conceptualizing it. My biggest thing is the taxpayers and our community members told us that loud and clear last year, today, on Tuesday, they want this building project, this facility project, as is, as proposed, on time. And I know that I'm committed to delivering that. And I think that we were asked to be creative when we came on the board and find creative solutions. And I think this is a great example of a creative solution that we found to deliver on this facility project that we all want, like last year. I mean, my kids have been in the 4-over-4 schools with art on a cart. We needed it last year, but we're at this point able to get it starting ASAP with rates and financing that we as a community would be able to float a bit more easily and give us, a bit more breathing room, because I think that we all need it right now.
And I do want to associate myself with Norm and Andrea. I didn't say this, but I'm 100% committed to this project being completed on time with 100% of the project. So I just want to make that clear.
Rob?
And I just want to add to Andrea's analogy. It not only allows us to buy the house, but it also allows us the funds we need for all the things that are in the house, including the people that work in the house. And I think that's a nice way of thinking about it. And it really is very creative. And again, kudos to all the work that went on in a very short amount of time to think this through and come up with the plan.
Michelle.
Just one more thing that I probably should have mentioned too. I also looked at the 20-year, right? So I just think it's important too, because when we were bringing this to the voters earlier, it was a 20-year. But this is an actual 15-year that's being presented too. So with that respect, there's like a $60,000 less impact of an expense. So I just thought that was just an important thing too, that, is another thing that is not going out longer to incur $60,000 more.
Norm.
Jim, this proposal Michelle's talking about for the rate of the bond, is this something that we bring to the board, or is the board deciding?
When you say we, who's we, Norm? I'm sorry.
Does it come from the building committee?
I would say, and I don't have all the dates and when we need to make decisions on the bond, but if the building committee has a recommendation, then that it would be great to have the building committee's recommendation on
Okay.
term. And so I assume you guys, actually I shouldn't assume. I do assume you guys will have a meeting and a recommendation, but I don't know all the dates off the top of my head.
The plan, just to give you some information for the record, is I think we're meeting on June 2nd, and we were supposed to have a proposal for you guys for the board meeting on June 4th. That was the plan, for us to have all the information and talk over with the building committee and bring a recommendation to you.
Then it sounds like it would be in perfect timing.
Perfect. That's why I want to check. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
And our bond counsel prepares the action items for the board to implement or to go to approve the purchase of the bond. And so after, we just have to work with bond counsel to prepare the action items and the documentation for the board to sign to whatever the length of term and the amount so desired.
Perfect. Rob.
Yeah, if we're done with the conversation on the bond part, I was curious if we could go back to the list of potential cuts and where we might choose our options. I hate to bring up past decisions by the previous board, but I think we all received a letter today regarding, and I thought it was fairly compelling, on the library assistant at Harold Martin School and the efficacy of that. The person made some good points about the volume of books that come in and out of Harold Martin. I don't really know a whole lot about it, so I'm simply asking what the cost of that would be and where we're at with that. Steve, if you could speak to that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Very, very difficult reduction. It's our libraries are our academic hubs and centers, and having a library media assistant allows the curation of the library media specialist to be the curator and to the instructor. And so absolutely with you. I think I had it the other day. I think it is a Michelle can look probably, I think it's like a $31,000 cost for the assistant. So yeah, I struggle with it, Rob. Absolutely, I struggle with that piece because it is just a very difficult change of something that's been with us for, as part of our foundation resources for, for as long as we know.
Does it limit kids' abilities to get in there and poke through books like we all used to do when we were that little, and all of that business? And
yes, not having a second adult, if the teachers are, the notion was to share an instructional assistant between two buildings. So if, for example, if the instructional assistant is at Harold and Karen Locke is teaching at Maple, a technology class, then the library would not be open.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? So we're saving $374 on the reductions, and then in order to get to 0%, we got to be at can't see.
337.5.
So is there a difference of 36,500? Am I reading that? Understand that correct? So
yeah,
if we have, and how much is the position at the library? It's 51,000.
Is it 31, Michelle? Can you find that?
Yeah, I'll take my, so yes, it's 31,033. So your issues were right on there, Steve.
So
yes.
Why couldn't the board, if there's a difference in that and the board finds value in that position, put it in there?
It certainly could reduce the reduction, and the nickel reduction would be squeezed. And Michelle is the fastest calculator on the East. She could.
I mean, it's
the new tax
we've achieved the goal of zero tax rate impact on the operating budget. And I'm just taking the difference of those two numbers, and we've received a lot of information a lot of people who find that position very valuable. We've done our homework, we've done our research, we've made adjustments to the bond project. I'm curious for the board's feedback. If I may ask, Jim, I'm putting that in here.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Michelle. Michelle has her hand raised, and then we'll get to that question, Norm.
So
Thank you, Jim.
I did calculate, and it's a 1 cent reduction. So it would still be a reduction. It would just, that would cost 4 cents of the reduction.
Thank you.
Well,
And I guess what I would ask, are there other items? Because I guess that is a very important item. I'm glad it was raised and we had the discussion. But I guess are there other things that we might want to? And if we had I guess thinking of a short list, if there were no others, it may be that we can make a verdict on that. But I'm just curious if there's other items.
Can I at least hear the argument, since I wasn't part of the board last year, can I hear the argument from Steve as to why then that position was part of last year's cuts ahead of everything I'm looking at on the screen right now? There has to be some reasoning to that.
Sure, it was, so it would reduce by a half of a person. You know, it would still have one, we'd still have some supports there. Remember, we were reducing by, at that point, all our assistants. We were reducing our numeracy assistant, and so we got to a pretty hefty load. But it was a regrettable, one that, it was a very difficult decision to make, because our libraries, and Bill texted me that also our libraries have evolved into our makerspace and STEAM initiative at Herald, and not having that second adult when we have such a strong STEAM, science, technology, the arts, and math, the STEAM notion. So it's even more profound. And in full transparency, once I made that cut, it wasn't well received by my colleagues. They're very professional and very supportive, but it was a tough one for them to work through.
Okay.
They're all, I mean, at that level, to be honest with you, they're very difficult.
Andrea, or I don't know, Seth, did you want to follow up? I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I wanted to go to a different cut and ask about it, but if there's more on the library, then I will wait.
Andrea, is yours on the library?
It is.
Okay, perfect.
No, when I'm looking at the current kind of superintendent's reductions for consideration, one thing I definitely notice is that these are all reductions that are coming so much farther along in the year. So a lot of these are already knowns, things that we know that we can do, opposed to when Steve would be putting forward things to consider reducing, not knowing that we have a global pandemic heading our way, or not knowing what our fund balance was gonna be at the end of the year, that we were not going to get contingency, and so we definitely are reducing our rising third grade down to 3 classes instead of 4. So that's how I'm reading the superintendent's reductions for considerations that we're looking at right now. I think on the side of the library assistant, knowing what we know now and knowing how important they are in not just kind of the library aspects, but the technology aspect, I would definitely be in favor of taking a look at that and reinstating that reduction. I think that that's something that would impact a ton of kids. I mean, that right there impacts 500 students. It impacts K through 6. Because if we do not have if we reduce it, that is one person bouncing between 2 schools versus having someone at both locations. So I'd feel pretty strongly that that is something that I would definitely like to see our funds going towards.
Seth, did you actually anything else on the library assistant before other questions or items come up? And Seth, you're on deck.
I wanted to ask about the English positions. Can you just tell me, specifically what's lost with those positions?
Sure. So I spent time with Chris and Rebecca today. So we're okay by reinstating one of the Englishes, and that meets our needs for requests. So the second edition, so this is a plus contract. This is one semester course above. And by reinstating one English class, that meets our needs. It would not be a reduction in English.
Okay.
Any other items? So right, oh, Norm.
I guess I'd like to know what your feedback is, Jim, about the position, because you know, we're at that phase right now where we have to make a decision tonight, and you know, I'm very confident about, you know, this position, and I agree with Andrea, and you know, we're all in this together, you know, with making these changes, and I think it's important us as a board to understand where you stand on it, please.
Sure. I think if we have additional funds and we can meet our obligation and what we set out to do, I have no problem funding the library media assistant position. So I was going to ask if there are any other. I mean, frankly, there's items on this list I would like to see us be able to bring forward, but it sounds like the board has a consensus around the library media assistant. I don't have any challenges with that. I think it's a good idea.
Can I make the motion?
I would hold off on making that motion because we're gonna actually vote on a final number, and I'm gonna ask Michelle to kind of help us put that together, which will come later, because I think having some public comment after we go through this discussion would be valuable as well. So we'll have a motion, and it'll be on like a number to present to the budget committee as we move forward.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome. Is there any other items for consideration? And if I don't hear any, then I guess I would just ask, it sounds like there's a consensus of adding back in to our budget the library media assistants, and seeing a lot of nodding heads, and we just heard comments from everybody, so I'm assuming that's the case. So what I think we'll do, actually, we'll stop there. Is there any other, or with that addition, so with the library media assistant added back in, are people feeling pretty comfortable with this proposal and sort of this plan moving forward, sort of as we've just described it? And what, if the answer is yes, what I would do is we would move on to the other business on our agenda, so to talk about the graduation and a little bit of, and then when we get to after public comment, I know Michelle's already busy because I can see her here on my screen calculating. We would come to a final number that we would bring to the budget committee that would have the tax rate impact, and that would be what we present along with these cuts and with that addition that we just included. So that would be part of the package we move forward with. That was a long question. So are people comfortable with this as we're moving as proposed?
Yes.
Jim, I just want to say I already have the information, so whenever you want it, you just let me know. So. Michelle,
why don't you tell us where we are? That'd be great.
So the decrease that was originally stated as 374,668 would be a decrease of 343,635, which represents a tax impact of a -1 cent. And so therefore the operating budget total would be 21,072,696.
Thank you, Michelle. Steve said you were a fast calculator, and he's proven to be correct. Are we all set to move on? It sounds like I don't see anybody else raising their hand or comments. And if so, we can move on, and we'll come back after public comments to that number that Michelle just stated. I'll insert it into the motion, and so that we have clarity and the public has clarity of what that final number is and what we're doing. As we end this part of our discussion, I just want to thank everyone. You know, each of us have spoken, I'm sure, to each other, and I've spoken to each of you on more than one occasion over the past 24 hours. And I just think the openness to have conversations and to throw ideas on the table, and you know, the kind of keep reaching and trying to meet, I think, the community where they are, both in terms of getting to a tax rate that feels like where we should be in this time, as well as you know, trying to make sure that we're using some of the savings to reinvest in program was I think a great it was a great bunch of conversations, and I think the end result, I think Andrea said it, you know, we were tasked with being creative, and I think this end result is a pretty creative one that meets all the needs that we have, and does keep some of the investments in the important areas like special education, which is, and now the library assistant, which actually is a wonderful thing to bring back into the fold. So thank you all, really appreciate it. So I'm going to move back to the agenda, just so we can reorient where we are. So we got through the funding level discussion, and so annual meeting planning. I'm going to ask Steve, if you don't mind jumping in here, for what we might be thinking about.
So, in just trying to get ready for the 30th, so I'm starting, what I think would be try to simulate as much as we could the efforts that were done regarding the 2 weeks ago to do as much as we can. So getting a team back together to do a one-page mailer tomorrow about whatever the board decides tonight, about the process and about the reductions. Pushing, I think, Wednesday, the joint meeting with the budget committee as the information session, make that so people can tune in. I talked with Neil today about raising the Zoom limit on the town, because that's a town account, not the school account, to 500 people, and he thinks that works. And so in the flyer, we talk about Wednesday, the joint meeting of the school board and budget committee, and then also explaining, working with Jean and James, the voting for Saturday, the 30th. So trying to get a flyer out, push everybody to Wednesday night as the information session, and then in voting instructions for Saturday, if that works.
How does that feel to everybody?
Great.
And I just want to give another shout out to Dulcie Madden, who again has volunteered her time and effort to help us get that mailing done and move it along. So as a super volunteer, we're very thankful to have Dulcie again step up and under short notice try to help us get all this information out over Memorial Day weekend of all things. So I know Dulcie's listening, so thank you.
Just want to, is everybody okay that we'd have the only information? I mean, obviously they can contact board members and ask specific questions anytime, but it would be the joint meeting, working with Janet to have some time for questions at the end and work that out. So it's last time we did a Tuesday, Friday, remember all that stuff. This would be a Wednesday, Saturday, because that's got the flyer's going to go out to what's going to go to the post office tomorrow. That just to make sure we're all on the same page on that. Everybody's perfect. And Dulcie and the team, and we will get together and we will fold and staple, and we'll do 2,800 every door deliveries.
Thank you for everybody who is going to be folding and stapling. And I think if any of us have a free moment tomorrow, I think extra hands would probably be very much appreciated. So thank you. All right. If there's no other questions or comments on process. Oh, I muted myself. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a conversation around graduation. And so I have, I've brought over Mr. Kelly to join us for this. And so Steve, I don't know if you have any setup, or should we just jump right to Chris? I'll let you sort of facilitate this part of the dialogue. Sure.
No, just a great appreciation to Rebecca, Chris, Michelle Cottonwood, Trish Walton, the community members who've joined this. Chris has spent hours coordinating and working, facilitating, trying to thread the needle of state requirements and desires of the community. And Chris is bringing forward. And if you saw it, there is a description in the folder. I don't know if you saw it in the shared folder. There's a memo type from Chris. I didn't announce that at the beginning, but Chris, welcome, and thanks for coming tonight, and thanks for all you've done on this very, very important topic about trying to, just to have the traditions as much as we can to support the class of 2020.
Great. Well, thanks for allowing me to jump into this agenda. And just real quick with the signs that went out, I do want to thank the PTA. They helped us sponsor the production of those signs. Great Northern Signs produced those signs for us. And we had a faculty member and her husband that also financially helped to support the production of those signs. I don't know if that faculty member wants their name known publicly, so I'm going to err on the side of caution on that. But it was a great day to hang out with the class advisors, Dave Chase, who helped to drive the minibus, and Danielle Meserve, who also assisted in the afternoon to go out and do that. So it was great to see some of our students and their families and take some pictures. It was just a lot of fun to bring some smiles to people's faces. So, and I also want, I want to thank Michelle Cotmore, Holly Sharon, and Trish Walton. They're really the three people I've been working the most closely with to come up with a plan that will address what I hope is, the hopes and dreams of the senior class. I think I shared with you the process the last time, and in this document that Steve shared is really just still in draft form. We will look to, upon board approval, to tighten this up. And I want to thank Neil Cass. Neil Cass and I spoke the end of last week, and he took this plan and brought it to the select board. The select board was in favor of this plan as well. And if the board is in favor of it, my next step is to then send this off to the New Hampshire DOE to gain their support as well. That's that three-legged stool approach, if you will, for approvals. And then we will move forward with other parts of this document. So obviously there are guidelines the state has put out for schools to follow in regards to the end of year events. Obviously graduation is the pinnacle moment of any high school seniors time in our schools. So it was really important to me to do everything I possibly could to try and come up with a plan, working with the class advisors and Trish Walton, that met that first priority for our seniors to get the class back together one more time. So this is what that plan does. And utilizing George's Park, we would work on setting up a grid. I've already talked to Dan Meserve. Dan Meserve is great at painting lines, as you know, because he's our athletic director and does soccer fields and field hockey fields. And he is fully on board to assist with setting up a grid that we would paint on the field at George's Park. And students would be assigned a particular square, if you will, of that grid. And that's where they would sit with their parents. One of the considerations we had to take in and take a look at was the number of guests each graduate would be allowed. I started with 2. One of the seniors expressed their concern to have us at least consider 4 guests. And so when I started doing the numbers and thinking about 73 graduating seniors and allowing 2 guests, that's 219 guests total, outside of, not including our faculty, myself, Steve Chamberlain, and their guest speaker. But if we allowed 4 guests, then that jumps to 365. And when I look at those 2 numbers and I think about how do we manage the social distancing piece and keeping everybody safe, there is a big difference for me between 219 and 365. So my proposal going forward would be to look at doing the senior class and then allowing each senior to invite 2 guests that would sit behind them within that grid for the sake of just managing a crowd, if you will. We've had contact with Chief Pecora. Chief Pecora is in support of having officers there to help with that crowd control. So we've covered that base. We have reached out to Chief Yale as well. Trish Walton's waiting to hear back from him. So those are 2 other bases or pieces of work that we've been working on. And this is a lot of work that would have to go into this if this is approved and something that we would move forward with. And obviously it's weather dependent. Right now, what we're looking at is doing this on the 13th in the evening, well after the town meeting that is scheduled to happen that day. And if it's not, if the weather doesn't cooperate, then we would push this to the 14th, Sunday the 14th in June. And so some people have asked me, well, why not Friday night? Well, Project Graduation, we've been working closely with. They're a wonderful group of people to work with. They are working hard to put together a parade in lieu of what they would do normally after graduation. So they're going to put together a parade for that Friday evening, late afternoon. And then we would do graduation on the weekend and kind of take a weekend approach to celebrate our seniors since they've lost, so much. So I just thought the more time we can kind of invest in a weekend on them, I think they deserve it. So I think the good things is this allows us to at least meet in person one more time. It allows our valedictorian, salutatorian to address their class. It allows Ella Whips to address her class in person. I think those are important life events that trying to record that and do that virtually just doesn't mean the same. And I think people, I've spoken in front of people, during graduation for the last 8 years. You kind of read the room and you live off of that energy. And I think that's just a great opportunity and experience. And if that's something we can do for those 3 individuals, I just think that would be a wonderful thing to try to do. And the challenging piece is making sure that we follow, the guidelines that are put through, making sure that all of our students and family members, one of the things they require, it is wearing masks. So yes, we would be outdoors. They would still have to wear masks to do this. And we would obviously do the social distancing, the sanitation of the chairs prior to the event. And then coming up with some type of screening mechanism for those people who would attend. So, and that could be simply a questionnaire. One of the things we talked about, one of the things I talked about with Trish Walton was utilizing a Google form that would have those questions on it. We would put that link out live probably the day of graduation, ask the families to complete that. We would have that information prior. And if the form was not completed, they would not be allowed to participate in graduation. But I'm sure because they believe that this is an important event, they would make sure to complete that. And then obviously we would need to have complete cooperation by all of the families. Because if we only allow 2 guests, there's a reason why we're doing that. So with change comes, some loss, and the pandemic has forced a lot of change upon us. But this allows me to at least get the senior class together one more time, allow them to have 2 guests, and award them their diplomas that day. It would not be a hand-to-hand exchange of the diploma. We would place the diplomas out ahead of time on the chairs in those areas that they had been assigned to sit. And we would still read the names of each graduate. We would ask them to stand. We would applaud and congratulate them. And then we would do a controlled exit of George's Park to, again, maintain social distancing. So there are details to all of those pieces we still need to iron out. But there's a lot of work that's gone into this. And this original kind of format that had been put forward to us was also given to me by another faculty member. We've kind of taken that and kind of run with that. And as you've seen recently in the news, Concord High has gotten a plan similar to this put through. They're doing it by their commons, but their commons have many more students involved with each one of their commons than 73, which we have in our graduating class. So I guess I have some confidence if the board approves that this would be approved by the New Hampshire DOE. John Stark, I heard recently, as of this morning, they had pushed something out that they're looking to do something in person too. So, but in full transparency, the only group so far that has, and I just feel it's important to be transparent, that was not in favor of doing something was our school nurses. And I understand from the health perspective. And so that's where they're at. They're not in favor of that. I totally respect that. I have a great deal of respect for Amy Cook. She's wonderful to work with and been very supportive of me when we first went into this pandemic mode. But I just want to make sure that I'm giving all those pieces of information. So that's it in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer questions. I know you've been meeting a lot.
Thank you, Chris. That was great, and thanks for the creativity. So if Norm would allow me, I would love to allow or ask Ella or Charles if they would, if they want to. There's no obligation, but if you want to comment or ask a question, since you're very much impacted by this, I'd just love to give you the first go with this. So Ella, I don't know if you want to start.
I don't really have any comments, although I am glad that you're kind of recommending that the board looks at 2 guests instead of 4, because I've had a couple of students contacting me with concerns of even just having any guests because they live with their grandparents and their grandparents are obviously at a higher risk than normal middle-aged adults might be, or just like other siblings. So I think that's a good idea.
Thanks, Ella. And Charlie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you can pass if you want, but I don't know if you have any questions or comments.
No, really, I like this idea. I think it's a very solid, really good effort towards making a graduation that will be special for our entire class.
Perfect. Thank you. Norm, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I hope that there's an opportunity still for this board to go. Definitely want to be there like we were last year. It's always a great chance to see our seniors off. Chris, is there any plans to record or live stream the graduation?
That's listed in there as a possibility. I have not had a chance to talk to Matt Stone yet about this. It's on the list. It's on the to-do list. There's a lot of steps that have gone into this. So I consciously made this effort to, or decision not to move on that yet until we see where we are with the board. If the board does approve, this will be emailed tomorrow to the New Hampshire DOE, and then I'll begin some of those conversations moving forward.
Hey, Chris.
Sorry, Rob. Yes.
I like the idea. I'm curious about, plans for onlookers who may just arrive, walk in, those kinds of things. Is there any way to manage that, or have we thought about that?
I've thought about it. We've talked a little bit about it with Holly, Trish, and Michelle. And that's one of the reasons why we chose like the soccer field. And I think we would have to, well, I don't know if the town would allow us, but one of the things we talked about is, do we put some type of temporary fence up on either side of where the graduates are? We would also, the faculty that are comfortable attending, we obviously would like to have them still attend, and they would be on the periphery of this grid, if you will. So they would kind of surround the senior class. I think that's a nice symbolic thing as a school community that, there's still our students up until that point where I turn and say to the school board that they've met all the requirements set forth by the state. Not that I have that whole thing memorized, but I do. And then we do our controlled exit. In regards to the crowd control, that's a question that Chief Pecora as well had. And we'll have to talk further with him about how we do that. I think it's I'm thinking, more high level with, there's some fencing and things that we would have to put, I think, some key personnel to say, you're not here, you can't go any further. I mean, if somebody wants to stand by the fence over by Park Ave, I don't think I have control of that area. I think the only area that I'm going to have control of is the actual area that the students are in. And I would work with Chief Pecora and Chief Yale on that as well. But it is a concern. It has been brought up. And in full transparency, it's something I still have to continue to work on.
Thank you.
You're
welcome. So just curious if you have a plan B. So if the board does approve this, it goes to DOE and they have issues, or they give a no, or I guess if the board gives a no, just curious what's an alternative to this plan?
Yeah, so the alternative would be to look at doing a drive-through type of scenario where the family would come in the car, and we would have to have a structured timeline for each family that we would lay out, and myself, Steve Chamberlain, board members would be at the high school. The student would come out of their parents' vehicle. It would be a picture taken. There would be a table that would be set up where the diploma would be. They would grab their diploma, and we would kind of confer the diploma that way. Because trying to do something else in town. The other piece I didn't share was the fairgrounds is not another option for us to do a social distancing type of graduation. We have been in contact with them. They're not feeling very comfortable opening up the fairgrounds for us. The insurance company that they use happens to be the same insurance company as one of the board of directors uses for the Charming Fair Farm. And so they shared with us that even for his business, they were not very comfortable opening up. So in fact, I'm not even sure that the draft barn is emptied. I think there's some equipment in there right now. Because we wanted to go in there and do some measurements in there. We also looked at doing this in our gym. The gym's just not big enough to do that. So that's why we ended up looking at George's Park.
Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments from the board? And so maybe Steve, this is an action item on the agenda. Is that correct? And so maybe I'll just ask a straw proposal. So Chris can maybe have dinner. How do we all feel about this? Is there general support for Chris to sort of submit this to the DOE, get their thoughts, and then there's still a lot of details to work out, but in concept, are we feeling pretty good about this? I see hand nodding and thumbs up. So Chris, if I were a betting man, I would bet that when we get to the action item on this one, that you're going to get the support of the board to move forward. And so I just want to say, great job. This is a lot of work, and I know you and your team have put a ton of effort into this. So my fingers crossed that the DOE will allow this to move forward. It sounds like a good plan. And we'll await word from you. And then however I think this board can help, please let us know.
I will, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a good night.
You too. So I'm going to bring the agenda back up for us so we can see where we are. So we've gotten through the graduation, and so we have a number of personnel updates. And so I'm going to hand it over to Steve to walk us through the next item or the next couple items.
Sure, thank you. And I appreciate the discussion and support of the graduation. So the first one is a maternity leave request by Hopkinton High School German teacher Sally Olson for the fall. And I think I left that action item off the agenda. So Jim, I will text you it and then we can slide it in as an addition. Then following up, it would be a long-term sub for that maternity leave, and that would be Herr Olson to come back and to support, because it's not the easiest thing to find a German teacher hanging around. So we appreciate Herr Olson coming back and working there. So those are the two hiring components. The other four are notice of non-return. The first one is Maple Street School in Clough, who is heading to a different part of the state to be a special education teacher. And we will certainly miss Len. The next one is the Hopkinton High School special education teacher, Erica Pack. We certainly wish her well in her endeavors and can support her anyway in her next stage of her career. The next one is the notice of non-return for James Skangas, English teacher at Hopkinton High School. We certainly wish him well, and we appreciate all their service as their time in the Hopkinton High School. And the last one is Alex Beckwith. Alex is an instructional assistant, but he's heading to become a full-time math teacher at a school. So he worked with our staff in a number of ways, and I actually had a chance to be his cooperating teacher as a former math teacher and got to support him, and look forward to him impacting youth at the next challenge, which is a math teacher. So those are the personnel items tonight.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions? Herr Olson didn't stay away for very long, did he?
No, but he's very fond of, I think it means more grandchildren, so he's a happy guy.
It's good to have him back. All right, seeing no questions or comments or concerns, we're going to move on to financial reports. So we have the monthly report for April, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. Michelle, thanks.
Sure, thank you. So in the packet, or I should say online, you saw the financial statement. Couple things just to help put clarity on how we got to where we got. So I did do a document on where the savings came in about remote learning that we knew of at that time, which we could find is more than that based on what doesn't happen that's encumbered type thing. But at this point, that's what that was. As well as kind of how did we get to the 650. So I hope that those things were helpful. Revenue obviously plays into how come we are at the situation that we are, as well as some things that didn't happen that we have to budget for, like 3 early retirements, and we budget not knowing who those people are, and when they come to fruition, or maybe they're just 2, then obviously that's a difference. As well as there is some bit of reality with where we are because we did have the budget frozen since July 1. You know, there was significant savings, I would say, in the supplies area. And that's hard to piece out what that really means, not doing remote, you know, being in remote learning. I think really I look at more of the remote learning. I knew a little bit because I was asked to close POs, but it also could be that supply POs that are in there kind of as like an umbrella for the whole year that haven't been closed yet. It could fall into that realm of being because of remote learning. And as well as, you know, the contract does state on both HEA and HES that we have to budget for a certain number of dollars related to workshops and or classes that have to be happening. And although some could say that that has a little bit to do with remote learning, it's a hard one really to say because we do know that there was an impact on, I would say, COVID-19, not necessarily remote learning, that lots of, not necessarily courses, but workshops definitely didn't happen because of that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Michelle. Any questions? All right, seeing none. Michelle, you on deck for the next item too, the budget adjustment?
Yes, that's right. So if we all remember, you guys have had a lot of board meetings. So it was a few board meetings ago. It was brought to the board about getting a design for the sprinkler system at Harrow Martin at some point, hopefully in the near future, we could accomplish that. And so there's a budget adjustment in the packet, and that is where I'm requesting that we take the money from. And so because of changes in custodial personnel, we did have some savings in that area. So I just felt that that was the cleanest way and shortest amount of accounts to actually have the budget adjustment come from. Yes, it could have come from somewhere else, but that's just is where it's coming from.
And Michelle, how much was that budget adjustment for?
$19,999.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions on that item for Michelle? All right.
I just want to say thank you to the board for getting that design done for us for the building committee. Just want to say thank you to the board. Thank you.
It's really important. Thanks. All right. So we will move on to the second round of public comments, and so I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. And so again, for any of those who would like to provide public comment to the board, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a raise hand button. If you press on that, I will be notified that you have something to say, and we'll be able to bring you over, unmute your line, and you can have your say. Appreciate it. So first up is going to be David. So David, bear with me one sec. David, you should be able to unmute your line. Thanks for joining.
Hey guys, Dave DiPiano, 68 Brookwood Lane. I wanted to first say I really appreciate you guys coming back to us with a proposal. I think the community asked you guys to be creative, and I think you've done a pretty solid job balancing the needs of the community as well as, you know, let's not forget the kids and their education. I did have some questions specifically around the splitting of the bond. So if you'll just indulge me for a minute, there's a few. I think just to clarify the first question, if I understood what you said, the rate on the second potential bond borrowing is not guaranteed, and we would have to pull that rate from whatever's available at the time. Is that correct?
So yeah, the rate on both bonds are not guaranteed. The bond bank doesn't guarantee rates. So what they do is they provide their best guess for municipalities and districts to do planning. And the closer you get to the next bond run, the more clear that planning guidance is. And so they sell their bonds on a date certain, and then when they sell the bonds, then you know the rate you get. So I wouldn't say it's a little bit of a gamble, but you don't know your rate until they do their bond sale. And so the bond bank tends to be a little bit more conservative in what they give to municipalities and districts for their planning. And the closer, again, you get to the bond sale, then the closer to the reality of the sale it becomes. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I mean, it more or less confirmed what I already knew, but for purposes of many who are listening on this call, I'm not sure that point was made clear earlier. Along that similar lines, those rates may be greater, they may be less than, we don't know. But I think as we're looking ahead, there is certainly still continued risk to the economy. And we could only hope that if we were to split the bond payment, we would get, something remotely close to what we would be getting on the first split. Talking about splitting the bond, again, related to the uncertainty of the economy, is there going to be, or maybe I'll just make a statement, you guys can talk about it after, but I would only be concerned about splitting the bond payment with the uncertainty in an economy that if the economy does in fact, quote unquote, crash between now and the second draw on a bond, I would want to make sure that if we support this, there's not risk to the overall project. And I did have some other questions that I know Michelle had addressed earlier about the 15 versus 20-year bond. And I guess the only last comment or question is, we should be considerate of the total cost of the project over the lifespan of it. That we do understand, again, back to the difference or potential difference in the interest rates that can have increased costs to the town. But I think you guys did get creative and you did provide short-term relief. And I don't necessarily personally see interest rates changing all that much between now and when you got to draw again. So I did want to commend you. Thank you guys for what you did. And I hope that you and the community as a whole can understand the sacrifices that had to be made. And again, at the end of the day, we're looking for the kids' education while also providing some relief to the town. So thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, David, thanks for your comments. The only other thing I'd add, because it didn't come up in our talk, and it maybe should have. It's not so much. It's the other option that may come up. So the bond bank does bond sales twice a year. They do it in July and they do it in January. And so, as we all monitor the economy and as all monitor interest rates, and we all sort of keep paying attention, if I think the recommendation from the building committee and from others is that, the interest rates are changing, and we want to ensure that now is that January would be a better time than July. I mean, those are decisions that we can make. We can remain flexible. It may mean adjusting some of our budget. But I did want to state that there are 2 bond sales a year at the bond bank. And so I think our planning has us doing it in July because it also takes advantage of the half a year payment, which helps on the savings. But for just, again, to sort of know all the things that are out there and all the options, that there is a sale in January that we could opt into if the need be. So next person who has their hand up is Jonathan Cohen. And so Jonathan, I'm going to bring you on to my side, and you should be able to unmute yourself. Jonathan, good evening.
Hi, Jim. Hi, everybody. Appreciate everyone's hard work, and certainly looking forward to the Budget Committee meeting next week when we get to find out how you vote and talk about that. I did have a couple of questions about the operating budget cuts, the $375,000 in cuts. One of the big ticket items there was the $32,500 for no raises for salaried staff. I'm assuming that does not include teachers, right? Teachers are a separate item. When we talk about salaried staff, we're just talking about support staff, or I just want to understand that.
So that was for administrative staff?
Yeah.
Teachers, because they didn't get a contract passed,
right,
their salary is not increased.
Right. And so did the staff, and I probably ought to know this, having been on the budget committee last year, but did the staff get a raise last year?
Yes, the administration as well as the teachers got a raise last year.
What was the percent raise?
I think it was a maybe 2.5. Was it a 2.5% pool last year? I think, Jonathan, I think it was a 2.5% merit pool.
Okay. Apologize for not. Probably ought to remember that myself. And then I wanted to ask about the English, the reduction in 0.10 FTE, right, from English. That's from the high school and the middle school. I was just curious to hear how, if you could explain a little bit like how that might play out. What would that actually mean to class size or the actual services that the children receive? How would that play out? Presumably that 0.10 FTE was in the budget because it was something that you thought was important. So I'm curious to hear, what would that feel like?
Sure.
Please, yes, Steve, yes.
Sure. So we start the budget in October, and we have projections and anticipated enrollment, and then we do, starting in January, we do registration and course requests. And so Rebecca is building the schedule as we speak. And so with the additional one added to the course load this year, we will meet all the student requests. So that's the one additional section meets the student need. So when we put the budget together in October and January, we're actually one section, one semester course over. So we're going to be okay.
So that would appear to be fat, for lack of a better term.
Oh, well, it is not needed, but we thought it was going to be needed when we started in October, November.
And that sort of, I am curious, and I know that there was some discussion of this. Without that contingency, I'm just curious, and I know you sort of talked about this a little bit, but how, because obviously things could change. I know a house across the way from me just sold to a family with 3 young children. I know another house is being put on the market, and they expect it to sell pretty quickly. People that don't have kids in the school system, if one of your grades, 3rd grade pops, as you say, or something like that, how do we handle that? We're trimming $375,000 from the operating budget, and we don't have a contingency. So I'm just kind of curious to hear how you folks think about handling some unanticipated costs that could come up during the school year.
No, it'll be a struggle, especially as you alluded to the 3rd grade and the 6th grade and those on the bubble, because it is still early. I know it's May, but our typical time is summer, where people move and start school years. So we'll be watching enrollment. There is not a lot of flexibility built in because we are, without the contingency. So, so we're hoping for pretty stable enrollment and not large increases this year.
So hope.
Yep.
Well, we cut the operating budget and we hope.
Well, I would also say good management. I mean, I think that we've seen this year that through good management that we've had 200. I can get the number wrong, but $260,000 ish in savings accrued to the budget. So I do think it's not just hope. We have good managers and people who watch these numbers and manage the numbers. So the work will be to manage the budget in order to find savings, so if we are caught with those type of circumstances, we can adjust.
Well, I think these are good things to keep in mind when we're talking about making such a substantial cut to the operating budget for the school. But I appreciate your consideration and the hard work everybody's doing. And I'll sign off and listen to the other questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. So next up on the list is Lori. So Lori, give me a moment and I will promote you. Promoting sounds so official. Lori, thank you. You should be able to unmute yourself. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks everyone. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay, great. So there's been an awful lot of discussion tonight. You guys have done really well in kind of trying to walk through this whole thing. And because there's been so much information, my question or my comment is it would be helpful for folks if you could kind of do a rundown of your timeline for sharing information so that we know, when you're going to the budget committee, when you're planning to have your mailers out, when you're planning to have the ballot available, all of that stuff.
Sure. So
Thank you.
no, you're very welcome. So I will do the best quick rundown that I can. So our hope is tonight, in just a few moments, we'll vote on a recommendation to bring over to the budget committee. Following that, tomorrow we will again, hopefully with the assistance of some volunteers, put together a mailing like we did. Well, it won't be the mailing like we did before the previous vote, but we'll put together a mailing that will go to every home, every address and PO box here in Hopkinton with the information that we will be voting on tonight, along with notice that we will be meeting with the budget committee next Wednesday.
Can you write this down?
Next Wednesday to go over this proposal. And then from what the moderator told us when we met with him on Tuesday was that his hope is that if we do that on Wednesday, on Thursday, he would be able to put the ballot together that has the number, the recommendation, and then the votes from the school board as well as the budget committee. And that would be available on Thursday. And then the vote would be Saturday morning. And I believe James said it would be like an 8:30 until, it would be a longer time frame for the vote than we had last time. So that, and then readjusting how they did the process last time to hopefully have a bit quicker turnaround. Steve, did I leave anything out?
I think you nailed it.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining. So next up is Suzanne Meyer. So Suzanne. Suzanne, you should be able to unmute yourself. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, sorry, took me a minute to find the unmute button. Hi, Suzanne Meyer, 224 Hopkins Green Road. I was just wondering if the money that was saved from the homeschooling, is that a consideration to put it in the contingency fund?
So the money that was saved from distance learning is about $240,000, and the contingency fund was a separate warrant article that was voted down. And so the mechanism of a contingency fund is sort of outside the operating budget, in which the board would be able to vote on and move those funds for where they need it. What we're doing with the $240,000 in savings is we'll put that into we'll end up in fund balance, which we'll put in next year's budget as revenue to bring down the tax rate. So it's a little bit of a complicated tale, and I apologize. That's sort of the mechanism. So it doesn't really act like a contingency, but the more fund balance that we have next year as we work through the budget, we can use for unanticipated costs as we move through the year.
And I was just curious, I saw that 2 of the personnel that was leaving was a special education teacher. And I know that you had talked about maybe, cutting that position. I think we're putting it back in the budget, but is there are you rehiring somebody else maybe at a lower cost or for that position, or?
Steve, do you want to address that?
Well, the position will be open, and we will be interviewing for it. So those 2 people left outside of the budget process. But
Okay.
we'll certainly we certainly try to hire value and expertise.
Thank you so much. You guys have done a great job, and I really appreciate all your hard work. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Okay.
So next on my list is Mark Zankel. So Mark. Mark, welcome. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Thanks for giving me a chance to speak. I just want to commend the board and Steve and Michelle for coming up with, I think, the makings of a really good proposal. And I support where you're heading. I had one question on the choice of the, where it appears you're leaning, which is to bring back the literacy position. I'm not sure if I have the right name for that. And it's really a question for Steve, which is that came from the board. And I guess the question that I was curious about, Steve, is if the board is going to bring $30,000 back into the budget, still would maintain the no tax rate impact. Was that the next thing that you wanted to see come back in?
It is, Mark, it is certainly right there at that tier. It is of great value. It's great support for our educational hub. So it would be certainly equal with any other, if not higher than any other topic, or sorry, any other area that we would bring. And the texting from the administration tonight is very strong in this piece. So it really does provide academic resources to our entire schools. So I think it is a great choice.
Great, thank you very much. And then I just had I guess kind of a comment on actually the graduation proposal. I think I was a little surprised at sort of the lack of conversation amongst the board about that. So maybe there'll be more, but just tracking the data in New Hampshire, there were 149 new cases reported today, 8 new deaths. We are not, our curve is not going down yet. It's flattened, but it's not going down. And so I'm just curious, and especially in light of that the 2 school nurses have expressed hesitation about it. I just am a little curious, I guess, to hear more from the board about how you are deciding to lend your support for moving that proposal forward. And I know it's moving it forward to the DOE for review, but I would just love to hear a little bit more, because it strikes me as, I mean, I get the reason why, of course, and I would love to see the seniors be able to do this. I have a graduating senior who's not at Hopkinton this year, and is graduating remotely, and I would love it if she had the chance to graduate in person. And I think that you can't do this without, I would say, at least some, and probably more than some, risk. And so I'm just curious a little bit to hear a little bit more from board members how you are thinking about weighing the pros and cons of that in light of the data out there, the nurses, and other considerations.
Thanks, Mark. And I guess I'll ask any board member that wishes to opine on that. Now's an opportunity. If you want to take it upon yourself to do that, feel free.
Sure, I can speak a little bit as far as what my thoughts are. I mean, I do recognize and think that there is some risk involved, and I think part of my comfort is knowing that this is sort of a 3-tiered stool, that this is not a singular decision. And I don't mean that in a way to slough the responsibility of the proposal in any way, but I find comfort in knowing that there are other kind of backstops to this. I think for me, looking at the proposal, looking at the 10 by 10 or 12 foot by 12 foot squares, those feel pretty good to me. I think some of my concerns were sort of what Rob had brought up about, if people decide just to sort of walk on, or, they don't arrive by their specific time. I think that there are certainly some considerations and things that need to be drilled down and looked at more specifically. But at this point, for me personally, I think that as kind of a working model, I feel like it's something that I am okay putting forward for others to also consider. And frankly, for folks who are more, up to date, not up to date, but the scientists and doctors to have a bit more of a say on this. That being said, I also recognize that our nurses are not in support of it. And I think that is something important to factor in. I guess I don't see any red flags that are so big that I'm willing to stop it from moving forward. That's how I feel about it.
Hey, Mark.
Rob?
So there'll always be concern, I think, with where we are and how we do things, because there's that unknown variable. Between the grid and the fact that everyone is wearing masks, and what knowledge I have about the masks, or at least what I've read recently, is if you're wearing a mask and I'm wearing a mask, the probability of transmission drops to a very, very small percentage. And factor that in with it being in an open air environment, the risks are fairly low, certainly not as low as not having it. But I would respect Chris Kelly and his group of people that worked through this, and I'm sure they thought about those variables, and now we'll let the Department of Education weigh in and make a final decision.
Anybody else wish to share thoughts? Seth?
I mean, I too thought that it would be helpful.
There's a lot of feedback, Seth.
I'm not sure why. I'll reserve my comments.
We can figure that one out. Anybody else? Norm, do you want to jump in? I'm happy to share thoughts too. No, I mean, I guess I'm just going to more or less echo Andrea and Rob's thoughts. I think it's at this point it's a solid plan, and that bringing it to the DOE makes sense for them to opine upon and improve, ask more questions, and bring their guidance and thought into the picture. This is the first public chance to participate in this conversation, and I do think if there are concerns from parents, that those concerns should be directed towards the school administration. They can direct those to the school board as well to hear thoughts. But I think to not delay the process that Chris has put together in order to get the decision determination by the DOE, it feels like having that decision to give them the go ahead to move that forward, this is the right time to do it. Otherwise, we're going to wait another. Our next meeting is not until June 4th, where I think it would be appropriate to bring this up, which feels really late. And so the fact that we can give Chris the go ahead to run this through the DOE, get their feedback, and do it in enough time to have a graduation, and to put all the planning together for something in mid-June. This feels like the appropriate time to do it. And I think enough homework and enough work had been done on the plan in order to feel comfortable that they've reached that point where they can get a next step on it. All right. So we'll go back to public comment, and if there's, I don't see any other hands raised, and so I'm going to sort of do the last call here on public comment. Oh, I just got two. Whenever I say last call, people raise their hand. All right, so Rita is next, and I'm going to. Rita, you should be able to unmute and comment.
Hi, got it. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Hi, it's Rita Blanchard, 111 Barton Corner Road. I'm trying to get clear on this, and for me, it's pretty much mud. So Article 8 did not pass, and you said a little bit ago that a few $100,000, while it wouldn't go into the contingency fund, it would just get plopped in the budget somewhere.
No, I'm sorry. So Article 8, if that was a contingency fund, did not pass. And so what I said was we don't have a contingency fund.
Correct. So where the money's saved from distance learning going?
That is undesignated fund balance. And so that is going to be used as we spoke about tonight, and we spoke about, it feels like weeks ago, but I think it was probably last week, that would be used to offset the tax rate.
All right. But I'm really curious where it's going to be used to offset. I'm looking at, I took a snapshot of the screen that Michelle had up. So correct me if I'm wrong, the teachers are not getting raises this year because the contract was voted down, correct?
Correct. The teachers do not have a contract.
Okay. So if we're saving 32 grand and change, Steve said last year the salaried staff and pool the raise was 2.5%. Correct?
I believe that's what Steve said. Yep.
Okay. So if we're saving 32 grand by cutting that 0.5%, I'm going to go rogue here. If the teachers can't have a staff, maybe administration and salaried staff should not have a raise.
Well, Rita, the plan, I'm sorry, I just want to cut you off because the plan is for the administrative not to have a raise. So that the merit pool, the 32,000 decreases the merit pool for the administrative staff.
Okay,
Well, they would not get it. Steve?
The only, so in Rita, in the non-union area, there's salaried and there's hourly. The salaried people are not getting any raise, but the hourly people, like our Teamsters, like our Hess employees, which did get support for raises, is getting. So our administrative assistant, our HR accounting assistant, our administrative assistant, our executive assistants, our non-salaried people are getting a 2% raise, but the salaried people are getting flat, no increase.
Okay, so they're getting a 2% raise. What was their contract for?
So they don't have, they are
You said
employees that will.
Hess, and you said something else. Hess
I'm sorry?
You said the Hess and the Teamsters.
Right, so Hess got supported a 2 to 4% raise depending on where they were, and Hess got, I think, over 2%. Michelle, I think I'd have to look, but I'm sure it's over 2%. Rita.
Okay, so I'm looking here. Hang on, I took notes. Someone else brought up the special ed hires, and you said, Steve, that they were left outside the budget. What does that mean?
So they did not leave because we were cutting a position in the budget. They left outside of the budget process.
So their salaries are still in the budget?
The number of special ed teachers, sorry, yes, and we fund, right, if we build the budget based on who we think is coming back, yep.
Okay. So should they really be in that graph as being taken out of the budget?
Those positions weren't in the graph taken out of the budget. So we had, when Steve presented us on Tuesday with considerations on the budget, there was a special ed, full-time special ed teacher that was being considered to be part of the cut to get to the place we wanted to get to, so for a zero tax impact. And so the board may decide, I think is going to decide, that cut not happen, and instead have found additional ways to make up those costs and still get to a zero budget increase.
Okay, so the teachers that left voluntarily, their salary is still in the budget, even though we were thinking about cutting them. And the library aide that was cut is back in the budget. And I'm hoping you guys are understanding my confusion here.
No, well, Rita, we did those two positions for the special ed teachers that are leaving to do something else. They were not considered to be reductions. They're leaving, and those positions need to be filled. And so they're like any other someone who leaves for greener pastures, the job still needs to get done. And so those positions were never part of the budget cutting process.
Okay, no, that's what I'm saying. But the library aid was cut as far back as January, but it's back, and it's now back in the budget.
That is correct. Yep.
I'm just gonna have to look at this closer. Is this budget gonna be online for public perusal? Because I'm missing a boat here somewhere. It's not making sense to me.
Yep. So this whole meeting the recording will be online, and then I'm happy to make the presentation that will be available online that sort of lays all this stuff out for you.
Will the actual budget be online? Actual budget proposal?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. And you guys meet with the budget committee a week from today?
Today is Thursday, so no, it'll be a week from yesterday. So we meet with them next Wednesday.
All right. All right, good. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And then the only other thing Rita had stated, I just want to clarify. She asked how the $240,000 of fund balance would be used to offset taxes, and I think I explained that last week. But it's used because we have the total amount that we can expend, and then fund balance is applied as revenue, and the more revenue you have, the less you have to raise in taxes. And so when you apply fund balance as revenue, it lowers the amount that we have to raise from individuals, which lowers the tax rate. So that's how that process works.
All right, and this budget y'all are gonna give us to vote on is a 0 increase from last year's, correct?
Actually, less.
It's a 1 cent reduction in the, it's a 1 cent reduction in the tax rate on the operating budget.
Right, because if we hadn't put the aid back in, it would have been a 5 cent reduction on the tax, correct?
That would be correct.
All right.
Thank you, Rita.
Great, thank you guys for your time. Appreciate your hard work.
So Dorothy, you have your hand raised, so I'm gonna. Dorothy, you should be able to unmute yourself and share your comment. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, this is Mike Martin. Dorothy's my wife.
Hi, Mike.
How are you all? Sorry to bother you folks tonight. I don't envy you at all. When I read the results of the Article 3, it appeared to me that all motions failed. Is that correct?
That is 100% correct. So we do not, no motion on operating budget passed, which is why we're undergoing this process.
Right. I'm genuinely concerned about delaying the sale of the bonds. I think you have a good opportunity to get a good rate at this point in time. You should look at, or I did this a few times in my career, and look at how else you could schedule that. I think you ought to grab the lower interest rate while you can. When you look at how much money the government is spending and the fact that they're raising some with treasuries and so forth, I don't know how you can expect the rate to get better by delaying it. Secondly, I did experience one time in my career where you couldn't sell bonds, or bonds were sold at 7% or 9%. Had the experience of refinancing bonds 13 years into the debt. You could do that and get a much lower rate. The third thing I would say is, if you can come up with something that allows you to say, because I think you got to get some of those no votes, and I think a lot of those no votes had to support the building project. I think you'd like to say the building project is moving forward and we've got all the financing arranged. I think you got to, in my own view, I just think that would be helpful to get some votes from the no side to the yes side. I think a lot of people want that project built, and the risk, I think there's a risk there by delaying. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. So we have Catherine next up. Hi, Catherine. Thanks for joining us. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, I just have a really quick question, and it wasn't discussed at this meeting, but the $92,000 to repair the elevator, is there any way that can be put in the facility bond with the rest of the building repairs?
Steve, you had mentioned this in a previous, I mean, we have a couple options. I believe that was one, but I don't know if Steve or Norm, you want to speak to that.
Sure, we're looking at it. It is looking as an add alt, but we're looking at the entire project. So it's either, we're also trying to look at the timing of it, but it is possible. It's possible to take it out of fund balance if we do have extra, or it's in our CIP and our maintenance trust as well. So we will certainly look at the best way to go about it, but it is a possibility. The project may be too tight to get that piece done as well, but we're all looking at it.
I see. Okay, thank you. And then just one other quick comment I wanted to make is, again, going back to all the motions for Article 3 and the way the numbers kind of came in for yes and no on May 16th. I know that this budget that's going to be proposed is like $21,072,696. And it still seems like that number is a little bit farther out than what maybe came closest to passing. I wouldn't want to see a budget not pass again on May 30th. So I would just keep in mind, you know, that almost 50% of the people were looking for a 0% increase. And then the other 50% were looking at, you know, just doing the budget as proposed. And those are like rough numbers. But it's somewhere in between there. And this number here is a little farther out than that. And I don't want to have to do this again. And I'm sure you guys don't either. So if you could keep that in mind, if you can anyway find some other cuts to bring this number down under 21 million, I have a feeling that that's gonna get a lot more blessing the way things are going and looking back at the way things went on the 16th. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, having a negative tax impact on an operating budget feels pretty low to me. Are there any other hands up for public comment? All right. Oh, there we go. We have one more. Elizabeth. I know if I ask, another one will come. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, Elizabeth Sides. I don't really have much to say except thank you to all of you for all the hard work that you've put in. I know it's a thankless job and it's really, really hard. And so many of us were disappointed last week after the vote. And I feel like I came into tonight, you know, not really sure about the whole bond issue. And I mean, I think everything is really tough, any decision you're gonna make. But I feel better about it after listening to all of you. So I really appreciate the clarity and the thought that you guys all put in. And to someone like me who's not really a numbers girl, it made sense to me. And I also get the concerns about the bond, kind of messing with it. Sorry. But I think that's probably our best choice. So I just wanted to say thank you. And for a lot of us that don't speak up, and I think you hear a lot of the negative more than the positive, I'm gonna try to do better about that and speak up, because there are so many of us out there who, you know, who love the schools and just really think that, you know, you guys do such a good job and you don't get credit. And I thank the prior board and Steve Chamberlain. You're amazing. I know you love our kids. And you get a lot, you know, you get yelled at a lot. And I'm sorry for that. And I know it's part of the job. So, okay, my 3-year-old is screaming. So anyways, thank you so much. I'll go, but you made me feel better about this and I hope it passes, and kudos to all of you.
Jim, that's a great way to end it on Steve Chamberlain's awesome. So. And I put that recorded, and that was just a little point.
And as Elizabeth, we're not the only ones who get yelled at. We just heard you get yelled at too. So thank you for your kind words. Anybody else for public comment? All right. Seeing none, I'm gonna close public comment, and I'm going to open up just so we can all see it. So we are at the end of the agenda, and I just want to point out some important dates coming up. Today is May 21st, so we can check that box off. We've done that. Everybody, please enjoy the long weekend and Memorial Day. No school on Monday. As we've talked about on Wednesday, there will be a joint meeting with the Hopkinton Budget Committee. So that will be the next time that this board gets together. Will be on May 27th. A date that's not on here, but I'm going to make sure everybody's aware of it, is May 30th. More information will be coming up. On May 30th, they'll be voting at the high school on a proposed amendment to the budget. And then June 12th is graduation. So that is the upcoming events. And so I am going to actually stop sharing this for a moment as we get into action items, because I do have the motions and then the right number that Michelle gave us here, so that the motions have the numbers. So I'm going to take these a little out of order, but we have two motions, two recommended motions pertaining to the budget. The first one, I would ask if there's a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to support the implementation of the $9.7 million facility project, and will ensure that the project has the financial resources required to complete the scope of the project on schedule.
Motion.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none. All those in, well, actually I can't do that, can I? So it's a roll call vote. We'll start with Andrea.
Andrea Folsom is a enthusiastic yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato is a yes.
Seth?
Seth Afrin, yes.
Norm?
Thank you guys for working on this and coming to an agreement. So Norm Goupel's a yes.
Perfect. And Jim O'Brien is a yes. All right. And so is there a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to recommend to the Hopkinton Budget Committee a proposed amendment to the operating budget of $21,072,696, which would be a decrease of $343,635 to the 2020-2021 budget. This represents a tax impact of -1 cent.
I make that motion.
I heard a motion by Seth. Is there a second?
Second.
By Rob. Any discussion?
I have just, this is to reiterate, this is us committing putting the library assistant back in, correct?
Correct. So this is the number that
Okay.
Michelle gave us after we put that back in. Yep.
And I guess the only other thing I want to say before we vote on this is just my little coach's speech to you all. You know, we're making this amendment to the to this budget, and I just want to be clear that defend this budget when we go to the budget committee. You know, I don't think they're going to have a problem. I don't know. We haven't talked to them, but we did a lot of work to get to this number, and I think it's a very tough number, but it's a compromise. We go there in unison, you know, as a board, but I just want us to go there to defend this, and I think that's very important that we go there. That I'm very firm with this number. I'm a little hesitant with us not locking it in, but I understand it's important that we're going there, you know, to defend it, and that's what I wanted to make very clear to all four of you, that we defend a budget that we agree on. Thank you.
Thanks, Norm. Any other comments on this?
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate my appreciation for the creativity it took to get to this point, and to not only get to a zero tax impact for this budget, but for a negative impact, a decrease on the budget. I think that we were able to do that in a way that is not cutting current staff or current programming. So I think that was a real accomplishment. Granted, we know more now than we did in January.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think, you know, the other night I said, or thought I said, the goal was to meet the needs of the kids and also meet the needs of the taxpayers. And between what Steve put together and our conversations and the craftiness of the phasing in of the bond. So just really good work. So I'm excited to move forward with this.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm really pleased that we're able to bring back that position for the special ed assistant. That was really weighing on me as I looked at where we were, only because I know when our students come back to school, there's going to be, I'm sure, there's going to be much more need for these assistants to help kids readjust and to get back into the school building, social and emotional welfare. And that felt really important to me to bring back. To be able to do that and still return, have a tax decrease of $0.01 feels like a pretty good job well done. And it wasn't easy. And I think the finding the creative solution around the bonding, I think was great. And I also think that by doing, I think where we are and what we're doing with the fund balance and putting additional funds into the Article 10, I think serves us really well, especially as we navigate what is going to be a really challenging next couple of years. And I think having a little additional headroom as we think about the challenges that we face. Norm circulated to us the CDC guidelines for schools that have come out in recent days, and it's a lot to think about. And so we have continued, and our administration has a lot to think about as we approach the summer and move into the fall. And so having some of this, I'm going to call it extra dollars because that's not really what they are, but having some of the flexibility in our tax rate and where we're going to go just feels really good to me. And as we manage through this, having that flexibility is really important. So kudos to everybody for the hard work. I think it's a good step forward for us. All right, any other comments? Seeing none, so we'll go to the vote. Andrea?
Andrea Folsom, yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato, yes.
Norm?
Norm Gupel, yes.
And Seth?
Seth A. Frame, yes.
Perfect. So let me switch back to the other screen.
And you, Jim. You got to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't vote. I always forget. Jim O'Brien votes yes. Thank you for reminding me. There's a lot of screen management at the moment. Okay, so we are now on action item number 15. So we've done 13 to 14 for our votes. So I would ask if there is a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the HHS graduation plans as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Perfect. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none. Andrea?
Andrea Folsom, yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato, yes.
Norm?
Norm Gupel, yes.
Seth?
Seth A. Frame, yes.
And Jim O'Brien is a yes. I remembered to vote that time. So that vote passes 5-0. Steve texted me an additional action item that I'm going to insert here, and I'll read it for everyone. Is there a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to grant Hopkinton Middle and High School German teacher Sally Olson's request for maternity leave, start date and duration to be determined by the superintendent of school?
And the baby. So moved.
There we go. All right. Motion is made and been seconded. Any discussion? Other than a congratulations.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, good luck. They were enrollment. Okay.
So let's start with Seth.
Seth A. Frame, yes.
Norm?
Norm Gupel, yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato, yes.
Andrea?
Andrea Folsom, yes.
And Jim O'Brien is a yes. So now we're on the next action item. Is there a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's nomination of Carl Olson, long-term substitute, start date, duration to be determined by the superintendent of schools?
So moved.
I'll second. Oh,
You got it.
You got it.
We need
Any
a
discussion?
rotation.
yeah.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Andrea.
Andrea Folsom, yes.
Rob.
Rob Nato, yes.
Norm.
Norm Gupel, yes.
And Seth.
Seth A. Frame, yes.
Jim O'Brien is yes. Next item, is there a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to accept MSS Special Education Teacher Lynn Pluff notice of non-return?
So moved.
Second.
Norm got it again. Any discussion? Seeing none. Norm.
Norm Gupel, yes.
Seth.
Seth A. Frame, yes.
Rob.
Rob Nato, yes.
Andrea.
Andrea Folsom, yes.
And Jim O'Brien is yes. Next action item. Is there a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to accept HMHS Special Education Teacher Erica Pack's notice of non-return?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Andrea.
Andrea Folsom, yes.
Seth.
Seth A. Frame, yes.
Rob.
Rob Nato, yes.
Norm.
Norm Gupel, yes.
And Jim O'Brien is a yes. Next action item, is there a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to accept HHS English teacher James, I'm going to screw up this last name.
Skangus.
Skangus? Okay, that is how I say it. Skangus notice of non-return.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes. I just want to say thank you to James. You know, he made a very big influence in my child's academics, and enjoyed my time just talking to him when I went for, you know, parent and teacher conference, and just, I wish him really nothing but the best.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Norm.
I got to teach with James for a couple of years, and he brought a lot of energy into Hopkinton High School. And I really, really enjoyed every day and all the conversations that we had over the course of those couple of years. So good luck, James, as you learn what's next.
I hope there's not feedback.
Nope.
I had something nice to say, but I'll have to save it.
You're gonna have Matt Stone work on your computer.
I don't know what's happening.
A motion has been made and seconded with some feedback. We'll start with Seth.
Seth A. Frame, yes.
Norm.
Norm Goop, yes.
Andrea.
Andrea Folsom, yes.
And Rob.
Rob Nato, yes.
And Jim O'Brien is a yes. Is there a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to accept HMHS instructional assistant Alec Beckworth's notice of non-return?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Rob.
Rob Nato, yes. And good luck to you, Alex.
Andrea.
Andrea Folsom, yes.
Seth.
Seth A. Frame, yes. I think I fixed it.
Norm.
Norm Gupel, yes.
And Jim O'Brien is a yes. Seth, I want to give you the opportunity to say something nice about James, if you so
I would
desire.
like to. So my son had him last year for 9th grade English, and he said that, dating myself to Dead Poet Society, which I showed to my son, he said that Mr. Skangus was his Mr. Keating, and there is no higher compliment than that.
I'm glad you got that in. That is a very nice compliment. All right. Last up, is there a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to approve budget adjustment 2020-4 to reclassify funds to cover the HMS sprinkler design?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Norm.
Norm Gupel, yes.
Seth.
Seth A. Frame, yes.
Andrea.
Andrea Folsom, yes.
And Rob.
Rob Nato, yes.
All right, so we have come to the end of
You, Jim.
our.
You got to
Oh,
vote.
oh, Jim O'Brien says yes. Andrea, I'm glad you keep tabs on me. Thank you very much. All right, so we've come to the end of our agenda. Steve, is there a reason for non-public?
Nope, I don't have one unless you do.
I do not. So before we adjourn, I'm not sure what the schedule is for our student reps. And so I don't know. Yeah, no one knows. You're more than welcome to join us at any time, but I do know you graduate on the 29th, and our next meeting is not until the 4th. And so
You never know with Jim O'Brien. We could have one before then.
I just want to thank both you, Ella, and Charlie for joining us and being part of the team here for the past year. Really enjoyed getting to know you and hearing your thoughts. Wish you sincerely the best of luck as you move forward. You guys are very talented and gifted, and it's great. So it's been wonderful. And I don't know if any other member wants to add any thoughts here, but thank you guys.
Thanks, Ella. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you guys. Good job.
Thank you guys for everything, and good luck. Thank you for great attendance.
It can only go up from here. So.
Yeah.
So with that, unless there's anybody who wishes to get a nasty text from me who says they don't want to adjourn, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.